Part 23. The Rebirth of Space, the Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 221. Chapter 221 Thinking Too Much. Aryuan leaned forward and said, I understand, little one. Elvizakin returned to Chinkuo Palace and asked, Is mother back? The servant replied, Go back to Mr. Lu, my aunt is back and is in Qingfang Hall now. Luzikin nodded and walked to Qingfang Hall. Mrs. saw Luzikin coming in and scolded him, That's good, I offended someone to death. Since childhood, I have never been so embarrassed. You can let others bang the table, stare, point your nose and curse, but you have to apologize to others in a low voice. Luzikin walked over and put his arms around Mrs.'s shoulders, and said with a flattering smile, Thank you for your hard work, ma'am. Luzikin's sudden affectionate gesture surprised Mrs. How many years had it been since her son called her aunt? She remembered that when her son was 6 years old, he went to live in an outer courtyard. From that time on, he called her mother, and from that time on, he saw that she was always respectful. Mrs. Jean looked at the stunned Yeshan and said with a smile, Just tell me, don't look at her crying when she comes back. No matter how much we try to persuade her, it will be useless. As long as Zichin says a word, she will promise not to complain again. How about it? Is this what I said? Mrs. Jean responded with a smile, Parents in the world can tolerate any grievance for the sake of their children. Zikin, what's going on with the Prime Minister? Does it make sense? Mrs. Jean was afraid that Mrs. would be embarrassed, so she changed the subject. Luzikin helped Mrs. sit down and replied, I don't know yet. I came out of the Yamen of Zhongsha province and saw the Prime Minister's entourage coming out. I guessed that I had invited my grandfather, so I waited outside. I didn't come back until my grandfather and Wang Xiang entered the tea house. Just wait, I'll get the letter in 2 days. Gu Huayu returned to Wutong Lane and saw Shi Niang and Wang Qin directing their men to clean up the yard. When everyone saw Gu Huayu, they all bowed their knees to greet her. Gu Huayu nodded slightly and said, Don't worry about me if you are busy with you. Where are Grandma and the others? Are they resting? Gu Huayu replied to everyone first, then turned to look at Shi Niang. Shi Niang bent her knees and said, Back to the princess. After dinner, the old lady sat for most of an hour. She said she was tired after sitting all day, so she went to rest. The master and his wife also said they were tired, so they all went to rest. Got off. It's really tiring to have guests all day long. Gu Huayu nodded and said, Everyone is tired after a busy day. Let's take a rest after tidying up here. Everyone bowed their knees and thanked him. Gu Huayu turned to Huadao, Uncle Hua, I'm going to have a rest too. Huada asked worriedly, Princess, are you okay? Gu Huayu shook her head, I'm fine. Uncle Hua has been tired for a day, so he should go and rest. Huada wanted to speak but stopped, bowing down to respond. Gu Huayu went to her small courtyard. Wang Qin looked at Gu Huayu's back and asked softly, What's wrong, miss? Have you cried? Huada nodded. Wang Qin lowered her voice and asked, What's going on? Weren't you fine when you went out? Who made the lady sad? Huada hesitated and said with some guilt, I may have done something wrong. Wang Qin frowned slightly and asked, What's going on? You should speak clearly. General Hua told the story of his disapproval of Gu Huayu's contact with Luzikin, and finally said, Master Lulu is engaged, and the British father-in-law is eyeing the lady, so what? I am worried that the lady will be hurt, so that's why. Huadao spoke incoherently. He thought he was doing it for Gu Huayu, but when he saw Gu Huayu crying, he felt like a sinner. After hearing this, Wang Qin sighed and said with relief, Don't think too much, leave the lady alone. The lady is a decisive and independent person. She understands your good intentions. If you calm down, she will know how to make choices. Huatan nodded, thank you, that's all I can think of. Gu Huayu returned to the small courtyard and said to Lonicera, I don't need to wait on you. You can go down and have a rest. Seeing the tears on Gu Huayu's face, Yan Dong looked at her worriedly and asked softly, the princess hasn't had dinner yet? How about I make some kebabs for the princess and dress up as a salad? Over the years, when Gu Huayu was in a bad mood, she often asked Lonicera to make kebabs for her. Gu Huayu shook her head, no, I'm not hungry. I want to be alone, so you can go down. Lonicera bowed her knees and retreated 3 times with 1 step. Gu Huayu slumped down on the soft couch, thinking about what she had said to Luzikin. Her heart ached as if she was suffocating. She looked at the roof with empty eyes, and tears flowed down from the corners of her eyes. Gu Huayu cried silently, letting her tears flow freely, until she had cried enough and turned around and entered the space. She really wanted to talk to Atong or Qin Feng. Unfortunately, Atong and Qin Feng are not here, and they didn't even leave a message. There are only messages from Luo Hao to her, as well as medical equipment and medicines prepared for her. Of course, there is also a list of items Luo Haoran needs. Luo Haoran is a practical person who trades goods and will clearly calculate what is being traded every time. Gu Huayu checked the medical equipment, put the things Luo Haoran wanted in the trading area one by one, and then turned around and came out. Back in the house, Gu Huayu was not sleepy, so she sat back on the soft couch and thought wildly. Unintentionally, Gu Huayu saw Qing Feng appear and asked, when did you come out? The green wind recedes toward the tip of the index finger. Gu Huayu reached out and took it off and put it on the table. Qing Feng wrote the word cry on the table. Gu Huayu said, you showed up when I was crying? Why didn't I notice? Qing Feng lay down on the table without answering, looking very hurt. Gu Huayu reached out and put Qing Feng into her palm, thank you for your company. The green wind stood up and turned in a circle in Gu Huayu's hand. Gu Huayu's mood improved a lot and she said, I'm sorry for making you worry. I'm just sad. I'll be fine if I cry for a while. Qing Feng leaned forward, as if nodding. Gu Huayu reached out and touched Qing Feng and said, I'm in a bad mood, can you talk to me for a while? Qing Feng leaned forward to express his willingness. Gu Huayu put Qing Feng on the table next to the soft couch, put her hands on the armrests of the soft couch, rested her head on her arms, stared at Qing Feng and said, Qing Feng, I miss my parents, I miss Huait's Jinlin. Gu Huayu talked for a long time, venting the emotions that were suppressed in her heart. Her mood improved a lot, and then she said, don't worry about me, I have a lot to do, and I will be fine. It's getting late, let's take a rest. Luo Haoran has prepared all the equipment for me. I can treat my grandmother's eyes tomorrow. After speaking, Gu Huayu kissed Qing Feng and put it back on her index finger. Then he leaned on the soft couch and closed his eyes to sleep. The next morning, Lian Dong went into the house and saw Gu Huayu nestled on the soft couch. He went to the back room to get a thin quilt and covered her with it. Gu Huayu woke up and asked, what time is it? I'm sorry for waking up the princess. It's only midnight. The princess can sleep a little longer, Lonicera replied apologetically. Gu Huayu didn't want to sleep anymore, so she turned over and sat up. She felt her eyes hurting, and said to Lonicera, go get me some ice cubes. By the way, tell my grandmother and others that I want to sleep a little longer so that they don't have to wait for me to use at breakfast. Bring me something to eat when you come back. Lonicera bent her knees and turned around to get the ice. Gu Huayu went into the inner room and looked in the mirror. She saw that her eyes were swollen like peaches. No wonder they felt sore. After Gu Huayu washed up, she figured it was time for Lonicera to come back, so she took a sealable bag from the medical box and returned to the outside. Lonicera came in with a bowl of ice cubes, and Gu Huayu put the ice cubes into a sealed bag to apply ice to her eyes. After some tossing, Gu Huayu's eyes were much less swollen. Gu Huayu had breakfast and went to the upper room to say hello to Mrs. Ping. "Grandma, I'll go get ready first. King Yu will come back to pick you up later. Let's treat the eye disease today." Mrs. Wang asked, "Yan Ran, where can we go to treat my mother's eye disease? Is it far? Do we need to make any preparations?" Gu Huayu smiled and replied, "It's not far. Auntie doesn't need to prepare anything. You can just come over with Grandma later." Gu Dichang asked, "Xiao, what about us? Do we need to go there together?" Gu Huayu shook her head, "No need. Dad and Mom will stay here for a few more days. When Grandma's eye disease recovers, I will take Grandma to live in Zhuangzi for a while." Gu Dichang nodded in agreement, "Okay, you have a lot to do, go ahead and do it." Gu Huayu asked King Yu to send him to Minjiao Pavilion. Lu Guang came over after receiving the letter. He greeted Gu Huayu and said, "Princess, Princess." Gu Huayu nodded towards Lu Guang and asked, "Is Bao okay?" Lu Guang leaned forward and replied, "Back to the princess, very good. When I woke up in the morning and Ruhi talked to him, he was not as resistant as before. When Ruhi fed him breakfast, he kept asking when the princess would come. I asked several times." Gu Huayu nodded, "I'm going up. Have people carry the things in the car up and put them into the operating room." Lu Guang nodded in agreement, turned around and asked King Zhu and Xinqi to come over and move the things. Gu Huayu went up to the second floor, and at the door of the surgery, she happened to hear Bao ask Ruhi, "When will Princess come over?" Ruhi shook his head and replied, "I don't know either. Princess is very busy and has a lot to do every day. When she is done, she will naturally come to see Bao. However, Bao has to be good and obedient. Princess, only my sister will come to see you." Bao nodded sensibly, "Okay, Bao understands." Gu Huayu pushed the door open and walked in. Bao looked up and saw her, looking at her with bright eyes, and said excitedly, "The princess is here." Ruhi turned around and saw Gu Huayu, stood up and bowed to greet him, "Hello, princess." Gu Huayu nodded towards Ruhi, smiled at Bao and said, "I heard that Bao is very good and obedient, right?" Bao nodded seriously, "Back to princess, Bao is obedient." Gu Huayu put a candy in Bao's hand and said, "This candy is for Bao." Bao looked at the candy in his hand as if he had found a treasure, and then put the candy away. Gu Huayu asked in surprise, "Bao doesn't like sweets?" Bao shook his head, "I like it." Gu Huayu asked, "If you like it, why don't you eat it?" Bao said sheepishly, "It's gone after you eat it." "Bao wants to keep it?" Gu Huayu's eyes deepened a little. She sat down, took out another candy and put it in Bao's palm. "Okay, you keep this one, and my sister will give you another one. You can eat this one, okay?" Bao nodded, "Thank you, princess." Gu Huayu watched Bao peel off the candy wrapper. Bao's eyes were big and black, and her long eyelashes were beautiful. While Bao was peeling the candy seriously, his thick eyelashes made Gu Huayu want to reach out and touch them. "Princess, where are these things?" King Zhu and Xinqi came in carrying the things and asked. Gu Huayu pointed to the wall and said, "Put it there first." Gu Huayu turned around and said to Bao who was eating sweets, "Bao, let King Zhu take you to play in the room next door. In this room, my sister is going to treat my sister's grandmother's eyes." "Okay. What happened to my sister's grandmother's eyes? Was she beaten too?" Gu Huayu shook her head and said, "Grandma's eyes were not beaten, but grew something that shouldn't have grown. It needs to be treated well. Only after it is cured can Grandma see." Bao looked at King Zhu, then at Ruhi, and asked, "Can you let brother Ruhi take me there?" Gu Huayu said, Brother Ruhi has to stay and help his sister, so Bauer can go with brother King Zhu, is that okay? Bauer hesitated for a while, and finally nodded in agreement. Okay, Bauer will go with brother King Zhu. Gu Huayu turned to King Zhu and said, take Bauer to the next room. There are toys in this bag. You can play with him for a while. Qingzu took Bauer and the toy bag away. Gu Huayu took apart the utensils and installed them one by one according to the diagram. Ruhi put his hands on the edge, full of curiosity about everything in front of him. Gu Huayu explained while assembling it. After assembling it, Gu Huayu tried it twice. After making sure it was correct, she asked King Yu to go to Wutong Lane to pick up MRS Ping. Gu Huayu left Ruhi in the operating room and asked him to learn with her. Ruhi looked at Gu Huayu's skillful technique and felt admiration. The Prime Minister's mansion, Wang Piyun was so excited that he didn't sleep well all night after returning from Qingqiu Duke's mansion. Although she did not see MRS Ye and Lu Ziqan this time, she firmly believed that they would definitely meet them next time. Wang Piyun had breakfast and said to Grandma Guan, Mammy, let's go shopping later, okay? Grandma Guan asked, Miss, do you want to buy something? Miss, I just asked the old slave to arrange for someone to go and buy it. Wang Piyun shook her head and lowered her head shyly, no, I want to go shopping and personally choose something practical and expressive of my feelings for MRS Jean and the others. The nanny came over understandingly and said with a smile, okay, I will go shopping with the young lady. Wang Piyun nodded and said, just the two of us, don't bring too many people. Grandma Guan understood what her young lady was thinking and nodded in agreement, okay, young lady will change clothes and I will make arrangements for you. Wang Piyun changed her clothes, and Aunt Guan came in and said, Miss, the arrangements have been made, and you can leave. Wang Piyun took Granny Guan out of the side door and wandered until noon. The two of them returned to the house with large and small bags of things. While the two were sorting things out, a servant came in and said, Miss, Courier from Madam's side is here. Wang Piyun was in a good mood and responded, please come in. After the servants left, Wang Piyun said to Grandma Guan, we haven't told our mother about the trip to the Qingqiu Palace yesterday. Mammy, if mother knows about it, will she blame me? Aunt Guan shook her head and said, the lady has not done anything inappropriate. Why should the madam blame the young lady? I thought the madam would be happy for the young lady. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 222. Chapter 222 Dilemma. Courier came in, bowed her knees to Wang Piyun and said, Miss, Madam, please go to the old lady's yard and tell me something. Seeing Courier's stern expression, Wang Piyun had a bad intuition in her heart, so she asked, Sister Courier, what happened? Why did mother call me? Courier is not a talkative person, so she only said, I don't know, please hurry over. Madam, she is waiting for you. Wang Piyun looked at Aunt Guan suspiciously. Grandma Guan said, it's not good to keep Madam waiting for a long time. Miss, please come over quickly. Wang Piyun nodded and followed Courier to the Anfu Hall of his grandmother, Mrs. Shangguan. Entering Anfu Hall, Wang Piyun felt that the atmosphere was stagnant. The servants were standing aside with their hands down, and the entire Anfu Hall was eerily quiet. Grandmother, Mrs. Shangguan, sat at the top, and mother, Mrs. Kui, sat on the edge. They both had sullen expressions and said nothing. Wang Piyun timidly went to the old lady Shangguan to pay her respects. Mrs. Shangguan nodded slightly, pointed to the chair next to her and said, sit down, girl Yun. Wang Piyun turned around and blessed her mother, Kui, before sitting down on the brocade stool beside her. Mrs. Shangguan waited for Wang Piyun to sit down, and then glanced at the stewardess beside her. The stewardess nodded and took the maid out of the room. After the servants left, Mrs. Shangguan turned her attention to Mrs. Kui and said, "Tell Yun Yetu about it." Wang Peiyun's heart was even higher. He looked at his grandmother and then his mother in fear. Mrs. Kui bowed to Mrs. Shangguan and said respectfully, "Yes." Wang Peiyun couldn't help but ask, "Auntie, what's the matter?" Ms. Kui looked at Wang Peiyun and said forbearingly, "Yunur, we can't end the marriage to the British prince." Kui's words hit Wang Peiyun like a bolt from the blue, leaving her unable to recover for a long time. Ms. Kui looked at her stunned daughter, heart-wrenching pain spreading throughout her body. Her daughter, who is as smart as a flower and as jade as ice and snow, has been treated like a treasure by her since she was a child and has been doted on in every possible way. However, she is despised like a waste. As a mother, how can she not hate her? Ms. Kui was afraid that her emotions would affect her daughter, so she tried hard to suppress the resentment in her heart. He advised softly, "Yunur, there are many good men in the world. We have withdrawn from the engagement with the British Crown Prince, and my mother-in-law and my grandmother are planning to marry Yunur again. We must find a good man for Yunur who is dignified and personable." Wang Peiyun came back to his senses, slid from the chair to kneel on the ground, and asked in a babbling tone, "It's so good, why did my mother-in-law cancel the engagement for my daughter? Didn't I already make up my mind? There is no better way to know a daughter than a mother." How could Ms. Kui not know what her daughter was thinking? Ms. Kui was struggling. How should she explain to her daughter? Tell the truth truthfully. Telling the truth, she was worried that her proud daughter would not be able to bear it. She did not tell the truth, and she was worried that her daughter would not accept the reality. Ms. Kui, who was usually eloquent, felt that she had become clumsy and did not know how to speak. Ms. Kui hated Mrs. and Luzikan in her heart. "Auntie, tell me, why do you want to break off the engagement?" "Daughter, please don't break off the engagement. My daughter loves Lulu, so why don't we break off the engagement? My daughter begs you." "Grandma, won't you cancel the engagement? My granddaughter doesn't want to break off the engagement." "Grandma, please, granddaughter, you love your granddaughter the most. Can you please help her? Let's not break off the engagement, okay?" Wang Peiyun saw that Ms. Kui didn't reply, so she asked more questions. Thinking that the real master in this family was the grandmother sitting at the top, so she began to plead with Mrs. Shangguan for mercy. Mrs. Shangguan looked at her granddaughter who was pleading with her, and her heart was as painful as Mrs. Kui's. Mrs. Shangguan, who has been raped all her life, has lived happily for decades. When has she ever experienced something as bad as today? Mrs. Shangguan saw her granddaughter crying and felt as if she had been stabbed in the heart with a knife. She raised her hand to wave to her granddaughter and choked with sobs, "Girl Yun, come to grandma." Wang Peiyun knelt and moved her legs to walk to Mrs. Shangguan. She held Mrs. Shangguan's legs with both hands. She looked at Mrs. Shangguan with tears in her eyes and continued to plead, "Grandma, can you help my granddaughter?" Mrs. Shangguan sighed and said, "Silly girl, it's not that grandma doesn't want to help you, it's that Lulu doesn't want to marry you. How can you ask grandma to help you?" Wang Peiyun looked at Mrs. Shangguan in shock. After a while, he asked, "Why? He doesn't want to marry me, why did he come to propose marriage? Why do he have to make a decision?" Mrs. Kui sighed and took over the conversation. "This morning, Mrs. Ye invited me to drink tea at the Qing guest house. She told me that the decision to discuss the marriage was the British prince's wish, not Lulu's wish." Wang Peiyun turned to look at Kui and asked, "Isn't the British Duke the head of the British Duke's family? He can't make the decision on Lulu's marriage? A head of the family can't make the decision on the marriage of his descendants, and it's not a joke." Mrs. Shangguan pulled down the corners of her lips and said, "Are there too many jokes about the British government?" Wang Peiyun had no intention of talking about anything else. He only wanted to marry Luzikin and asked, what will happen to them if I insist on not breaking off the engagement? Mrs. Kui replied, I have also asked Mr. Ye about this. Ye said that she was only responsible for conveying Lulu's wishes to me, and she didn't know anything else. Ye she also said that Lulu was stubborn and no one could force him to do something he didn't want to do, not even the British Duke. Wang Piyun leaned on Mrs. Shangguan's legs and didn't reply for a long time. Mrs. Shangguan looked down at her silent granddaughter and said cautiously, Girl Yun, not only did Mrs. Ye go out looking for your mother-in-law today, but Lulu also went to the Yamen to look for your grandfather. Wang Piyun looked up at Mrs. Shangguan and asked, to break off the engagement. Mrs. Shangguan nodded, yes, your grandfather is very angry. Wang Piyun originally wanted to wait until his grandfather left the government office, then go and beg his grandfather to help him. After listening to her grandmother's words, Wang Piyun's last illusion was shattered. She felt aggrieved and desperate. She lay on Mrs. Shangguan's lap and cried painfully, Why? Why do you treat me like this? For a mountain girl, he actually such humiliation to me. Mrs. Shangguan was stunned, looked at Ms. Kui with sharp eyes, and asked, what's going on? What kind of mountain village girl? Ms. Kui sighed and told Mrs. Shangguan what she had heard before. After hearing this, Mrs. Shangguan was so angry that she slammed the table and said, what nonsense! Lulu is young and ignorant. Yashan and Qinyu are also fooling around. They think I am easy to bully. Seeing that Mrs. Shangguan was angry, Mrs. Kui sighed, alas! That girl is not an ordinary village girl, she is the princess of the imperial family. The person Lulu is interested in is the beautiful girl from the Hua family who suddenly appeared, Mrs. Shangguan asked with a straight face. Ms. Kui nodded and said, I heard from my siblings that she is that girl. Mrs. Shangguan frowned slightly and said, I understand. You go back first. I will discuss it with your grandfather before making a decision. Wang Piyun looked at Mrs. Shangguan in confusion, Grandma, do you really want to break off the engagement? Mrs. Shangguan squeezed Wang Piyun's hand and advised her with sincerity, Girl Yun, your sincerity must be paid to those who cherish you, and you will be rewarded. But, Wang Piyun said. Before Wang Piyun could finish speaking, Mrs. Shangguan interrupted her words, you are still young and you don't understand some things. Grandma doesn't blame you. But you need to remember that you are the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister, and your words and deeds are related to the face of the Prime Minister. You go back first and wait peacefully. Grandma and your grandfather will definitely stand up for you and let the British Duke explain this matter. Wang Piyun wanted to say that she didn't need to explain, she just wanted to marry Luzikin. Ms. Kui came over to help Wang Piyun, took the opportunity to squeeze her arm, and reminded. Yunur was stunned by what happened today. Hurry up and thank your grandmother. Wang Piyun looked at Mrs. Kui and saw her mother winking at her, bowing and thanking her, Granddaughter, thank you grandma. Mrs. Shangguan's eyes softened a lot, and she said warmly, go back. Remember grandma's words, be good, grandma will make the decision for you. Wang Piyun said goodbye and exited Anfu Hall with her mother. Coming out of Anfutang, Ms. Kui took her daughter to Yewan. Back to Yewan, Mrs. Kui sent her servants back. After the servants left, Wang Piyun leaned against Kui and cried, Auntie, my daughter just wants to marry Lulu. Mrs. Kui hugged her daughter and said softly, Lulu doesn't want to marry you, how can you marry him? Yunur, there are many good men in the world, Lulu is not the only one, do you understand? I just want to marry him. Mrs. Kui helped Wang Piyun upright and said with a serious face, you girl, why don't you listen to my advice? I know you want to marry him, but now it's not me who doesn't want you to marry, nor your grandfather or grandmother who doesn't want you to marry. It's Lulu who doesn't want to marry. Do you understand? Is it okay to forcefully massage the head of a cow without drinking water? Wang Piyun said sadly, it was the British Duke who came to discuss the marriage, and it was the British Duke who was unreasonable. Even if the matter was brought to the Emperor, it would be the British Duke's fault. Kui said angrily, so what? The problem is that Lulu doesn't have you in his heart. After Kui finished speaking, she was worried that her too straightforward words would hurt her daughter, so she calmed down and said softly, it is true that they are unreasonable. Anyang was also very angry. Today she pointed at Yeshan's nose and cursed her until she was speechless. She said that this was a marriage decided by the British government and privately for Lulu, and that Lulu did not know about it. On the 4th day of May, there was a long queue of betrothal gifts from the British government. Everyone in the capital knew about it, but Lulu was the only one who didn't know. Even if Lulu didn't know, what about Yeshan? She doesn't know either? She is Lulu's aunt, why didn't she stand up and stop it? What a bully. Wang Piyun thought for a moment and said, Auntie, my daughter just can't swallow this breath. They are too bullying. Ms. Kui patted her daughter on the shoulder and said, my mother knows it. Don't worry, this matter concerns the face of the Prime Minister's government. Your grandfather, your father, they will not just sit idly by and ignore it. The British government must have an explanation, a statement that satisfies everyone in the Prime Minister's office. Wang Piyun nestled in Kui's arms and said, Auntie, you have to make the decision for Yunur. Ms. Kui smoothed Wang Piyun's hair and said, you are my daughter. Naturally, I won't watch you being bullied. Don't worry, Yunur, I will take back the humiliation you suffered today. Wang Piyun nodded, thank you, Mom. My daughter is going back first. Kui helped Wang Piyun straighten his clothes and warned, Yunur, don't be impulsive when things happen. You need to remember that your family will not let you be bullied for nothing. The days are long and there are many ways to take revenge. We can pay you back 100 times 1,000 times for the humiliation you suffered today. The premise is that you have to protect yourself. Understand? Wang Piyun bowed and said, my daughter will remember her mother's teachings. Seeing that her daughter's mood had calmed down, Ms. Kui felt relieved and said, Go back and have a good rest and wait for news. Wang Piyun said goodbye. Watching her daughter leave, Ms. Kui said to Manager Lu beside her, let people keep an eye on Xiao Xiangyuan. If Yunur does anything, report it immediately. Mama Lu bent her knees and turned around to do the instructions. The British Duke came out of the Jingbo tea house, got into the car and said, go to Prince Yen's mansion. After Du Bin handed over to the coachman, he leaned over and asked, my lord, if you have anything to give me, please go and report to the prince first. The British Duke thought for a moment and said, nothing else. I will discuss this with the prince first. Du Bin bowed and said, yes, I'll go and give you the instructions. Du Bin lifted the curtain and explained something to the boy following the car. The boy bowed and hurried towards Prince Yen's mansion. The British Duke's car arrived at Prince Yen's mansion. The side door of the prince's mansion had been opened. The British prince's car went straight into Prince Yen's mansion and stopped at the screen wall. Qin Jiayun was waiting here. Du Bin helped the British Duke get out of the car. Qin Jiayun bowed and said, Your Majesty is waiting for the Duke in the study. Please come with me. After saying that, Qin Jiayun led the way, and the British Duke followed Qin Jiayun to the study. The wise king stood on the corridor at the door of the study. When he saw the British Duke coming, he went to greet him and said, Grandpa, please come to the house. What happened? I asked you to come here in a hurry. The British Duke sighed, raised his hands and bowed to the wise king. There's no rush, let's go to the house first and have a rest. The wise king saw the British Duke sighing, and while expressing relief, he politely invited the British Duke to enter the study. The two of them entered the room and sat down in a respectful manner. I promised to serve tea and then left. The wise king signaled, "Grandpa, drink tea slowly." Grandfather picked up the teacup on the table, lowered his head to take a sip of tea, looked up at the wise king and said, "Zi Qin went to find the king's prime minister in the morning." The wise king's expression froze, he clenched the armrests with both hands, straightened up and asked, "Zi Qin went to find the king's chancellor? What did he do to find the king's chancellor? To cancel the engagement." The British Duke sighed heavily and nodded, "I never thought that he would go to the king to cancel the engagement regardless of it." After receiving the British Duke's reply, the wise king softened and leaned back. After a long silence, he said quietly, "This is what he can do. In the first place, this marriage should not have been made regardless of his wishes." The British Duke sighed, "I didn't expect him to be so decisive. His surname is Liu. You are his cousin and you usually treat him well. How could he be like this?" The British Duke felt like a dream. No, he never dreamed that Liu Zikin would put him in a dilemma. The wise king leaned his head on the back of the chair and said quietly, "I have reminded you a long time ago that Zikin looks as gentle as jade and is gentle and honest. He seems to be easy to talk to, but in fact he is very principled. In those years, he accompanied me as an attendant and read the homework assigned by Grand Scholar Yang. I wanted to do it perfunctorily, or let others answer on my behalf. The second brother and the third brother have all done this." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, The Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 223. Chapter 223 Rumors. You always told me not to study too hard, and it was too bad. You said that eating well and sleeping well are more important when you are growing taller. Only Zikin will try his best to let me complete my homework. Sometimes I think, I am a prince, and I don't need to take the scientific examination. I just understand the principles, so why bother to study hard? After Zikin found out, he ignored me for a long time. He didn't pay attention to me until I admitted my mistake and studied seriously. Zigzun, Xiren, and the others all follow me. Whatever I want to do, they will accompany me. Regardless of right or wrong, just indulge me. Only Zikin never allowed me to do anything extraordinary. If he becomes stubborn, I will be afraid of him. At that time, I disliked him very much. After being granted the title of king and opening a palace, I realized that Zikin treated me really well. The wise king sat up straight, looked at the British Duke and said, "I have reminded my grandfather and my mother and concubine that we should treat Zikin with sincerity, and we should not rely on our old age to show off, nor use our status to use power to suppress him. Zikin will do this. Doesn't make sense. He likes the girl from the Hua family, so does he have bad intentions? Why confront him? How will the current situation end?" Grandfather often said that the Xian Prince's palace and the British Duke's palace were one body, with one being prosperous and the other suffering. The British government is the king's maternal family and the king's support. But what did the second uncle and Xiren do? What are Zigzun's abilities? What can he do for this king? Looking at the British government, only Zikin can help me to some extent, but you always push him far away. What do you want me to do? The British Duke felt regretful, but when the wise king scolded him, he still couldn't lose face. His face turned red and he lowered his head. I thought that since he was a child, he has been the most knowledgeable about etiquette, and etiquette he has always understood the general situation and taken the overall situation into consideration. That's why I decided to marry him. The wise king interrupted the British Duke, "You always only think about him knowing the general situation. Have you ever thought that he would feel aggrieved?" No. When the wise king said this, he suddenly thought of something and stopped talking. The British Duke looked up at the wise king and asked, "My lord, what's wrong?" The wise king thought for a while and said, Ziqin is not a person who cannot be wronged. It has been almost a month since the marriage to the prime minister's palace was finalized. Why did Ziqin break off the engagement at this juncture? What happened in the past 2 days? The British Duke looked at the wise king blankly and shook his head. I am so worried about the affairs in the palace that I have no time to care about other things. Xian Dynasty raised his voice at the door, here comes. Qin Jiayun came in response, bowed and said, Your Majesty. The wise king ordered, let me go and check. Is there anything going on in Jinqiu's mansion in the past 2 days? Qin Jiayun lowered his hands and exited the study. Wait a minute. As soon as Chen Yun retreated to the door, King Xian called out. Qin Jiayun stopped, bowed, and asked, Your Majesty, please give me your instructions. The Xian Wang thought for a while and continued, let someone check if there is anything going on with Princess Yan Ran. Go down. Okay, I understand. Qin Jiayun stepped back. The British Duke didn't quite understand what the wise king meant, so he asked, Your Majesty, what is this? The wise king frowned slightly and said quietly, Ziqin is a man who can endure no matter how much wrong he suffers. But if someone he cares about is wronged, he will definitely take action. With Princess Yan Ran being the one he cares about, most of the people in Jinqiu's mansion now, one of them must have been offended. Otherwise, Ziqin would not be in a hurry to break off the engagement. The wise king was in a trance. Once upon a time, he was also the person he protected. Since when did he become farther and farther away from him? The British Duke nodded and said, Your Majesty, we have to give an explanation to the Prime Minister's mansion. Your Majesty, how should we handle this matter? The wise king shook his head with a headache and said, This matter needs to be carefully considered. Please let me think about it. When does the king want my grandfather to reply? The British Duke replied, Within 3 days. The wise king nodded and said, I understand. I will go to the palace to see my mother-in-law and see what she wants. I will discuss it with my staff later. My grandfather will come back tomorrow. The British Duke stood up and said, Okay, I'm waiting for news from the prince. The next day, Lu Ziqin listened to Rugjuan's report in the study of Qing Keju. Sir, the British Duke went to Prince Xian's mansion early this morning and talked with Prince Xian in the study for most of an hour. Subsequently, the British Duke came out of Prince Xian's mansion and went to Zhongsha Province Yamen, where he sat with the Prime Minister for half an hour. After leaving, he went straight back to the British government. Lu Ziqin nodded and said, I understand, keep staring. Rugjuan bowed and responded, Okay, I understand. After Rugjuan retreated, Lu Ziqin asked, Has Ruhi come back? Aryuan nodded, leaned back and said, I came back at the end of yesterday, and I went to Minjiao Pavilion at the beginning of Mao today. As Ji said, the princess treated Mrs. Ping's eye disease the day before yesterday. In a few days, Mrs. Ping's eyes will be able to see. Also, Bao'er's injury has improved a lot, so I don't have to worry. Ruhi also said that the princess gave him many medical books. Lu Ziqin listened carefully and knew that Gu Huayu was doing well. His anxious heart calmed down, but then he felt disappointed again. Lu Ziqin waved his hand, You go down, I'll read a book. Aryuan bowed down and stepped back, lowering his hands. After Aryuan left, Lu Ziqin picked up the book on the table and flipped through several pages without reading a single word. Lu Ziqin got up upset, walked around the room, and then walked out. Aryuan, who was waiting outside the door, saw him and asked, Where are you going? Ziqin responded casually, Go out for a walk. Aryuan immediately responded, Okay, little one, go prepare the car. There's no need to prepare a car, I'll just walk around and not go far, Lu Ziqin said. Aryuan followed Lu Ziqin, Okay, I'll go with you and stay with you. Ziqin looked back at Aryuan and said, Stay away from me. I want to be alone. Ryuan muttered, if I want to be alone, wouldn't it be better not to go out? Luzikin glared at Ryuan, who quickly lowered his head. Luzikin walked forward, with Ryuan following closely behind him. Luzikin stopped and said, can't you stay away from me? Ryuan shook his head, no, I don't know Kung Fu. These are extraordinary times, so I have to stay with you, little one. Luzikin saw that Ryuan insisted on following, so he had no choice but to follow him. Luzikin came out of Kinkju and wandered aimlessly on the street. He said he wanted to be alone, but in fact he was most afraid of being alone. When he is alone, all he thinks about is her. He misses her, but he's afraid that he won't be able to control himself and go find her. Ryuan reached out and gave Luzikin a hand. Sir, be careful. Luzikin came to his senses and found that he almost hit a tree. Sir, do you miss the princess? Ryuan asked, looking at Luzikin, who was in a daze. Luzikin glanced at Ryuan but didn't look back at him and continued walking forward. Ryuan followed behind and said, if I miss the princess, just go and have a look. Don't let the princess know, just look at it from a distance. Luzikin stopped and asked, do you know where Xiao is now? Ryuan shook his head and said, I don't know. Luzikin looked at Byruan with disgust, no one knows where it is, how can I see it? Ryuan defended, let people go and find out. Luzikin shook his head to stop him and said, no, Xiao has very good eyesight and ears. We haven't seen her yet, but she has seen her, which annoys her again. Ryuan came up with an idea, if the princess sees it, I will just say that I am passing by. Isn't this what I taught you before? Luzikin shook his head, no, I don't want to tell lies in front of Xiao. Sixth Master, our prince is here to invite you. Luzikin turned around and saw Qianjun, the guard beside King Chen, bowing his hands to him in greeting. Luzikin found that he had reached the gate of Yufui Yuan in Zhouqiao. Yufui Yuan is the property of King Chen. Luzikin looked up and saw King Chen standing in front of the window looking at him. When he saw him looking up, King Chen smiled and nodded. Luzikin cupped his hands, turned back his gaze and said to Qianjun, it's better to meet by chance than to meet him. Please ask Qianjun to lead the way. Qianjun leaned forward and said, Master Lu, please. Luzikin followed Qianjun to the private room on the second floor. King Chen greeted him at the door and said with a smile, Zikin is in such a good mood that he has time to go shopping. After Luzikin bowed his hands to King Chen in greeting, he replied with a smile, I am studying at home. I feel dizzy from reading. I came out to get some fresh air. I didn't expect to meet the prince. King Chen smiled and said, that's because you don't come to this area of Zhouqiao much. I always come here to sit here every now and then. If Zikin comes to this area, we should meet each other often. Come, let's sit here. King Chen smiled easily, and while leading Luzikin to the soft couch, he turned around and ordered, let them make a pot and bring up the melon slices. Luzikin said hurriedly, no need to bother, I can make any kind of tea. Wang Chen said with a smile, you are lucky today. A few days ago, my sister sent someone a can of melon slices. My sister said it was this year's new tea and the best melon slices. Luzikin bowed and thanked him, I'm so flattered. The two of them sat down. Zhixiu, the young man next to King Chen, came in with tea. King Chen took the tea and sent it to Luzikin. Luzikin hurriedly bowed to express his thanks, picked it up, took a sip, and said, good tea. Wang Chen waited for Luzikin to put down his teacup and asked, Zikin said he was studying at the University of Science and Technology. Are you planning to take the scientific examination? Luzikin nodded, yes, I plan to give it a try next year. King Chen nodded, that's a good idea. Now that you've made up your mind, prepare well. I'll use tea instead of wine to wish you a gold medal. Luzikin then raised his glass to express his thanks. The two of them talked politely as usual. Several princes are similar in age. King Chen is half a year older than King Xian and half a year younger than King Jin. Several princes were enlightened at the same time. The mother-in-law of King Chen was of low status and cautious in handling affairs. When King Chen was studying in Nanshufang, he was also restrained and forbearing. Lu Ziqin likes King Chen's non-competitive nature. When someone embarrasses King Chen, Lu Ziqin will come forward to defend him. King Chen will remember Lu Ziqin's feelings in his heart and treat Lu Ziqin a little more politely than others. Lv Ziqin sat in Yufui Yuan for most of an hour and stood up to say goodbye. King Chen sent Lu Ziqin to the door of the restaurant, and Lu Ziqin held his hands to say goodbye. Coming out of Yufui Yuan, Yuan said, "Sir, I just received the news that people from the Prime Minister's palace have gone to the British Duke's palace to cancel the engagement." Lv Ziqin stopped and turned to look at Yuan. "Are you sure?" Yuan leaned forward and said, "I'm sure. It's said that the old lady Shang Guan of the Prime Minister's office asked the master to test the horoscopes of the master and the third lady Wang. She said that the horoscopes of the master and the third lady conflicted, and the two were not a good match." Yuan told Lu Ziqin what he had heard. After hearing this, Lu Ziqin smiled and nodded. If the 8 characters are in conflict, they are not a good match. This one is very good. Let's go. Seeing Lu Ziqin walking forward, Yuan hurriedly caught up and asked, "Master, where are we going?" "Shopping," Lu Ziqin replied casually. Yuan asked, "Isn't this just a stroll? Where else should we go?" Lv Ziqin replied in a good mood, "Let's go to Daowen Street." Yuan, with a look of understanding, replied, "Oh, I understand, I want to go to Huayu Pavilion, right? The fragrant dew of Huayu Pavilion is very good." Lv Ziqin turned to look at Yuan, "You talk a lot." Yuan replied with a silly smile, "Sir, this is a bit far from Daowen Street. Let's take a car there." Lv Ziqin readily agreed, he was eager to see her. Yuan hailed a car and ordered him to go to Daowen Street. The coachman is a good person. Along the way, he talked to the two of them about the divorce of the engagement at the British Prime Minister's palace. The conflicting characters are just an excuse. People like Wang Xiang have already become immortals. With the recent scandals in the British government, the Prime Minister is naturally unwilling to marry his precious granddaughter. Ruan wanted the coachman to shut up, but Lu Ziqin stopped him with his eyes. The coachman was driving in front and could not see the expressions of the two of them. He continued to talk non-stop. The Prime Minister's office broke off the engagement. In addition to the scandal caused by the British government and being punished by the Emperor, there is also a rumor. Have you heard about it? Ruan looked at Lu Ziqin, and Lu Ziqin nodded towards him. Yuan asked, "Old man, you know so much, what are the rumors? Tell me." The coachman responded politely, "As a young man, I walk around the streets and alleys of the capital all day long, so I hear and see a lot." There was a bit of pride in the driver's words. Yuan nodded in agreement, "That's right. If you travel around the streets like this, you will naturally be well informed. What rumors are you talking about?" The coachman smiled and said, "These days, there have been rumors in tea houses and restaurants that the 6th master of the British government has been sick since childhood and is very weak, so he has not proposed marriage. Otherwise, Mr. Lu would have gotten married long ago. He also said that Wang Xiang was very cruel. For the sake of the future of his children and grandchildren, he pushed his granddaughter into the fire pit regardless of her happiness." Yuan didn't understand, and asked dully, "How come marrying Mr. Lu is like jumping into a pit of fire?" The coachman said, "You, a young man, are unmarried and have never experienced human affairs. Naturally, you cannot understand what I am saying. The rumor means that Mr. Lu has been sick since he was a child and his body is very weak. He is afraid that he is inhumane. Think about it, if the 6th master is really inhumane, What if the wife of the Prime Minister marries him if he doesn't jump into a pit of fire? The driver laughed as he explained. Ryuan secretly glanced at his grandfather and saw that Mr. Liu's face was ashen and his fists were clenched. Ryuan wanted to laugh but didn't dare, her face turned red from holding it in. The coachman, unaware of the situation in the carriage, continued, "Think about it, it's inhumane. What's the difference between marrying Miss Wang San and being a widow?" Luzikin shouted, "Stop." The driver stopped the car, turned around and asked, "Aren't you two going to Daowen Street?" "We haven't arrived yet, why do we have to stop?" End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 224. Chapter 224 Wrong Blame. Luzikin had already jumped out of the car. Ryuan took out a piece of broken silver and threw it to the driver. He gave the driver a thumbs up and said, "Old man, you know so much. I reward you, you don't have to look for it." The driver took the money, bowed and thanked Ryuan repeatedly. Ryuan caught up with Luzikin and asked, "Master, let's call a car again." Luzikin replied with a swollen voice, "No, I will walk over." Ryuan followed Luzikin and asked, "Is he angry?" "I don't want to be angry with a coachman. Just a driver, what does he know? Can you tell me how he knows? Besides, I used the elixir given by the princess to cure the poison that has been in me for many years. Humanity says this." Luzikin turned to glare at Ryuan, and interrupted Ryuan's words with a deep voice, "Shut up." Ryuan quickly shut his mouth and said no more. The two of them walked forward in silence. After a while, Ryuan couldn't help but ask, "Sir, the coachman said that this news was spread in tea houses and restaurants. Do we want to check it out?" Luzikin shook his head and said, "I can't even imagine who did it. What's there to find out?" Luzikin thought that Gu Huayu wanted to find out the truth about that year and avenge the Hua family before he was willing to talk about marriage. Until the truth is found out, there will be people coming to propose marriage. This rumor can help him avoid a lot of trouble. Seeing Luzikin's confusion, Ryuan muttered in a low voice, "Isn't it true that I am inhumane?" Luzikin looked at Ryuan and asked, "Ryuan, do you want to be a coach in Longzi for a few years? The staff of Chang'an restaurant are trained in Longzi." As soon as Ryuan heard that he was assigned to Longzi, he immediately apologized, "Sir, my brain can't speak. I originally wanted to say how could I be humane, but I ended up saying it wrong." Luzikin was so angry that he blurted out, "Go to Longzi and exchange Kinglan back, immediately." "Master, I'm wrong, I have to accompany you to Daowen Street." Ryuan panicked and quickly begged for mercy. Luzikin stepped forward and said without looking back, "I don't need you to accompany me. You can leave for Longzi immediately and come back after the new year." Ryuan looked at Luzikin walking away, raised his hand and gently gave himself a mouth, "I told you to talk too much, now it's okay." Luzikin walked to the next street, raised his hand to hail a car, and took the car to Daowen Street. This coachman didn't talk much. When he got on the car, he only asked where Luzikin was. He didn't say much after that and sent Luzikin to Daowen Street. "My guest, we're here." Luzikin jumped out of the car and touched his body, then he remembered that he didn't bring his money bag. Whenever he went out, he had almost no chance to use money unless they were followed by him. Over time, he lost the habit of carrying a money bag. Fortunately, the coachman stopped the car opposite Huayu Pavilion. Just when Luzikin was embarrassed, he looked up and saw Qingyu coming out of the shop, so he shouted, "Qingyu." Qingyu Sungsun went over and saw Luzikin standing on the roadside calling him, so he walked over and bowed, "Sixth master." Luzikin said, "Help me pay for the ride, I forgot to bring my money bag." "Oh." Qingyu took some broken silver from his purse and handed it to the coachman. Luzikin walked towards Huayu Pavilion and asked, Is Xiao here? Qingyu followed behind, shook his head and said, no, the princess went to Maxing Street with Uncle Hua this morning, and today she signed contracts with the owners of Jiangnan Trading Company. Lu Ziqin turned around and asked, Dichang Bank is already open? Isn't it not open yet? Qingyu replied, it will open in the next 2 days. The owners who signed the contract today had business dealings when they were in Hangzhou, and the contract signed now contains additional clauses. Lu Ziqin nodded and asked, will Xiao Yude return to Huayuj soon? Qingyu shook his head, this little kid doesn't know. Lu Ziqin thought for a while and said, would it be convenient to send me to Minjiao Pavilion? I'll go to Minjiao Pavilion and wait for Xiao. Qingyu nodded, it's convenient. Mr. Lu, please wait while I go to catch the car. When Lu Ziqin went to Minjiao Pavilion, Lu Guang got the letter and came out to greet him, Master 6 is here, please come upstairs. King Zhu, make a pot of melon slices for Master 6. King Zhu leaned down and said, okay, come on. Lu Ziqin found that Lu Guang and the others treated him much more enthusiastically, and they really protected their master. Lu Ziqin went up to the second floor and saw Ruhi and Bao reading a book. They were both immersed in their books and did not notice his approach. Lu Ziqin stepped forward and saw a beautifully illustrated book in Bao's hand. The pictures are as beautiful as the real thing, or even better than the real thing. Lu Ziqin frowned slightly and asked, what is this? Ruhi and Bao looked up at Lu Ziqin and quickly stood up. Ruhi bowed and said politely, Master. Bao imitated Ruhi's behavior and shouted softly, Master. Lv Ziqin pointed to the book in front of Bao and asked again, what is this? Bao closed the book and asked Lu Ziqin to read the cover. He explained, Compendium of Materia Medica. The princess sister said, let Bao keep these pictures in mind and take Bao to the mountains to collect these medicines. Lu Ziqin picked up the book on the table, flipped through a few pages, then looked at the front and back covers, and then put the book back on the table. Lu Ziqin glanced at the book in front of Ruhi. The cover said surgery. Lu Ziqin's heart was shaking like a turbulent sea. The material, typesetting, illustrations, and printing of this book were all exquisite. Even the best royal printing bureau at the moment could not produce such an exquisite book. Lu Ziqin often walked around the palace. Among the books collected by the emperor from previous dynasties, none of them could compare with the book in front of him. Master, why are you here? The princess has gone out and is not in Minjiao Pavilion. Lu Ziqin nodded, I know. I'll wait for her here. You can continue and don't worry about me. Ruhi and Bao sat down to read a book again. Lu Ziqin walked to the window and looked across the window. In a few days, the Hua family's old house had been cleared and construction began. Lu Ziqin looked out the window, his mind racing. Sixth Master, your tea. King Zhu came in with the tea and bowed to Lu Ziqin. Lu Ziqin turned around and nodded, thank you, just put it on the table. King Zhu put down the tea and said, Master Lu, use it slowly. Lu Ziqin nodded and returned to the soft couch, drinking tea while looking at Ruhi and Bao in the distance. The two of them were focused on their books and did not pay attention to Lu Ziqin. Lv Ziqin leaned on the soft couch. He was sure of one thing. Xiao knew many things that did not belong to this era. He did not believe in evil spirits and heresy, but he could not explain what happened to Xiao. After a while, Ruhi came over with Bao and said, Sir, I'll take Bao for a walk in the backyard. The princess told me that if I read a book for half an hour, I would have to walk downstairs twice. Lu Ziqin nodded, go ahead and don't worry about me. Ruhi took Bao downstairs. Lu Ziqin walked to the table and flipped through the book Ruhi was reading. After looking at it carefully for a while, Lu Ziqin put the book on the table and sat back on the soft couch. Lu Ziqin waited until dark and did not wait for Gu Huayu to come over, so he had to get up and go back to Qingqiu Duke's mansion. At the time of Yushi, Lu Ziqin took Rugjuan to Gu Huayu's yard in Wutong Lane. The difference was that there was no ladder under the wall, so he had to slide down from the tree. With a click sound, Luzikin felt a force pulling him from behind. He looked back and saw that the hem of his clothes was hanging on a branch. Gu Huayu laughed out loud by the pillar. Luzikin turned around and saw Gu Huayu and begged, "Xiao, help me." Gu Huayu came from behind the pillar and cut off the hem of Luzikin's clothes with a dart. Luzikin was able to get away, turned around and looked at the clothes hanging on the tree, then looked down at himself. It's a pity that these are good clothes. "Xiao, we need to install a door here." Gu Huayu looked up at the tree and said with a smile, "I think this is good." Luzikin stretched out his hand to hold Gu Huayu's arm, pulled her into his arms, and whispered, "Little girl, your dress is torn, you have to buy it for me." Gu Huayu nodded slightly and replied softly, "Okay." Luzikin hugged Gu Huayu and said with a smile, "Okay, if someone wants to buy clothes, just don't install them if the door is not equipped." After speaking, Luzikin kissed Gu Huayu on the forehead and murmured, "Xiao, I miss you so much." Gu Huayu hugged Luzikin's waist and responded, "Me too." Luzikin lowered his head and kissed Gu Huayu's lips. When Luzikin's breath entered Gu Huayu's lips and teeth, Gu Huayu's heart trembled and she couldn't help but respond. An awkward situation seemed to have never happened. The two became entangled and it took a long time to let go of each other. Luzikin put his arm around Gu Huayu's waist and asked in a low voice, "Are you tired from standing? Do you want to sit down?" Gu Huayu nodded, held Luzikin's hand, and walked into the house together. Gu Huayu asked, "Would you like to drink tea?" Luzikin shook his head, "No, I don't want outsiders to disturb us. I just want to sit and talk with you to relieve the pain of missing me these days." Gu Huayu smiled and said, "You still have to drink tea. It's just that I'm not good at making tea. What about you? Can you? I'll boil the water and you make the tea. How about it?" No one came to disturb him, so Luzikin agreed happily, "Okay." Gu Huayu carried the pot to the small red clay stove outside to fill the water, and Luzikin followed beside her. "You went to Minjiao Pavilion today?" Gu Huayu asked. Luzikin nodded, "Yes, I missed you. I went to Huayu Pavilion first. I didn't see you in Huayu Pavilion, so I went to Minjiao Pavilion." Gu Huayu explained, "I went to Maxing Street to sign contracts with the owners of Jiangnan Commercial Bank at the bank. Originally, I wanted to go back after signing the contract, but as a result, Lu Dong's family in Hangzhou introduced his friend Wan Dong's family in Jingzhou. After a long delay, he went back to Wutong Lane directly." "The bank's business is going to Jingzhou?" Luzikin asked. "Maybe, I haven't decided yet. Do you want to do business? It's always good to know more people. Do you need to meet all these people? The bank has opened, and you are not very busy," Luzikin asked worriedly. Gu Huayu shook her head, "No, I plan to leave the bank in Uncle Hua's hands and leave it to Uncle Hua to take care of. Even after today, I didn't show up personally." When the water boiled, Luzikin reached over to pick up the pot. "Let's go in." Gu Huayu returned to the living room and put the tea leaves into the cup. Luzikin poured boiling water into the cup. After making tea, Luzikin put the kettle on the lower shelf of the wall shelf. He turned around and saw Gu Huayu walking out, so he followed her. I saw Gu Huayu covering the furnace mouth with an iron plate. Gu Huayu turned around and saw Luzikin and smiled at him, "I was just talking and forgot to seal the fire." Luzikin leaned against the doorframe, looking at Gu Huayu and smiling without saying a word. Gu Huayu looked at Luzikin's affectionate eyes and walked towards him. Luzikin reached out and hugged Gu Huayu into his arms, looking down at her. He said softly, "I miss you very much." Gu Huayu raised her hands and put her arms around Luzikin's neck, stood up on tiptoes and kissed Luzikin. Luzikin hugged Gu Huayu tightly, lowered his head to meet her, and kissed her for a while. Until Gu Huayu felt that she was suffocating, Luzikin let go of her and whispered in her ear, "Little jealous guy, don't do it again. You must be jealous out of nowhere, you have to know that I only have you in my heart, huh." Gu Huayu turned her head and bit Luzikin's earlobe, applying a slight force. The pain made Luzikin hug Gu Huayu tightly. "Little one, it hurts, don't bite." Gu Huayu let go of her mouth, kissed Luzikin's red earlobe, and said domineeringly, "Remember that you have a seductive face, don't go out to mess around with girls, and stay away from women when you see them. Otherwise, I will be jealous." Luzikin held up Gu Huayu's face and said seriously, "Write it down. I promise, I will stay away from my mother when I see her in the future to avoid any unforeseen disaster." Gu Huayu nodded with satisfaction. "That's pretty much it?" Luzikin bit the tip of Gu Huayu's nose and said dotingly, "You are such a jealous person, you just drink vinegar without asking anything." That day, Miss Wang San went to the Duke Chinquo's mansion. "After I got the letter, I went out through the side door and hid until she left before going back." Gu Huayu asked in surprise, "You escaped? She didn't see you?" Luzikin nodded. "Not only did I avoid it, my mother-in-law also avoided it. I accompanied her to a clothing store, a silver shop, and then went to Chang'an restaurant for dinner. My mother-in-law also slept in the Chang'an restaurant." "Ah, that's it? Qinjian, I'm sorry, I blamed you wrongly." Gu Huayu lowered her head in embarrassment to admit her mistake. Luzikin raised Gu Huayu's chin with his hand, asked her to face him, and said, "It doesn't matter, it's all over. It's okay, she will never come to the door again in the future. Remember, I only have you in my heart, and you can only have me in your heart. From now on, no matter where you go, remember to take me with you and don't leave me behind." Gu Huayu was immersed in Luzikin's affectionate feelings and did not notice Luzikin's worries. He nodded and said, "Okay." Luzikin lowered his head and kissed Gu Huayu, and his heart, which had been hanging for a few days, finally returned to its true place. The two of them sat back on the soft couch hand in hand. Gu Huayu leaned in Luzikin's arms and grasped his knuckled fingers. "Qinjian, why did the Prime Minister's palace suddenly go to the British Duke's palace to cancel the engagement?" Luzikin looked down at Gu Huayu and said truthfully, "That night I went back from Minjiao Pavilion and begged my mother to accompany me to the Prime Minister's mansion to cancel the engagement. My aunt feels that this will hurt the face of the Wang Xiongfu and offend people very much. So I asked my mother to invite Ms. Kui, the mother of Miss Wang San, out, and I went directly to the Prime Minister to inform them of my intention to cancel the engagement and give them the initiative. However, even so, the people in the Wangxiang mansion were still offended. From now on, you should be more careful. Take your subordinates with you when you go out, and don't go out alone." "Will they be angry with me?" Gu Huayu sat up straight and asked. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 225. Chapter 225. You are mine. Luzikin turned his head to look at Gu Huayu and said, "How many true gentlemen are there in this world? It's always good to be on guard against one or two." Gu Huayu thought of Wang Piyun going to the shop to look for trouble, so she nodded and said, "What about you? If you offend them, they will look for trouble for you, right?" Luzikin hugged Gu Huayu into his arms again, shook his head and said, "I'm not afraid of them. At worst, I won't enter the official career and live my life as I want. I just can't give Xiao a dignified and decent life. I'm afraid I will wrong you." Gu Huayu said with a smile, "It's okay. Now I am the princess. In the eyes of ordinary people, I am already very noble. If we are getting married, you will be the guest of honor, which is not bad, right?" Luzikin smiled, lowered his head, and said in a low voice, "How about the princess give me the status of guest of honor as soon as possible?" Luzikin's breath spread on Gu Huayu's neck, making her feel itchy. Gu Huayu hunched her neck and hid while replying, easy to say, easy to say. When I avenge my family, I will take you in. Lu Ziqin sat up straight and said seriously, Xiao Yu, I will ask my mother to come to propose marriage first, and we will get married after you have avenged your great revenge. Okay. Gu Huayu shook her head and refused without thinking, no, what happened back then was not simple, and I don't want to involve you. Lu Ziqin's face darkened in displeasure, Xiao, we are so close, are you still pushing me away? Seeing that Lu Ziqin was angry, Gu Huayu hurriedly explained, Qinjian, please listen to my explanation, I am not pushing you away. Lu Ziqin asked, then why don't you let me come to propose marriage? Gu Huayu raised her hand and scratched Lu Ziqin's frown, and said gently, don't be anxious, just listen to what I have to say. Lu Ziqin looked at Gu Huayu without saying anything, waiting for her to continue. Gu Huayu said, Qinjian, if we discuss marriage now, we will be tied together openly, and the Duke Chinquo's palace will be involved with you, so we will naturally be involved. You know what happened back then was not simple. Before finding out the other party's details, we need to think one more step. I don't want to hurt our relatives and friends who care about us just for revenge. We must avenge ourselves, and we must protect those who love us. Lu Ziqin thought about it and said, okay, it's up to you. However, you have to let Mrs. Ping and the others know about our affairs. What, are you afraid that Grandma and the others will discuss marriage for me? Lu Ziqin took over the words, I've learned from the past, you want to do it again. Gu Huayu raised her eyebrows, looked at Lu Ziqin with a smile on her face, and said jokingly, you have already made up your mind with someone, wouldn't it be unfair if I don't discuss marriage with them? Lu Ziqin hugged Gu Huayu close and said, little girl, you deserve a beating. Gu Huayu raised her chin and said arrogantly, how dare you? Lu Ziqin kissed Gu Huayu's cheek and whispered, it's not that I don't dare, it's that I'm reluctant to let go. After finishing speaking, Lu Ziqin looked at Gu Huayu lovingly, and then said, I know, Xiao can't bear to make me sad. Looking at each other, Gu Huayu was intoxicated by Lu Ziqin's gentle gaze. She wished that time could stand still and stop at this moment forever. They only have eyes for each other. Lu Ziqin raised his hand and pinched Gu Huayu's chin, and said seriously, Xiao, promise me. No matter who comes to ask for marriage, you can't agree. You are mine. Gu Huayu saw worry in Lu Ziqin's eyes. She knew that this was the look of someone who was insecure. Gu Huayu raised her hand and touched Lu Ziqin's extremely beautiful jawline, nodded in agreement, and replied domineeringly, remember what you said yourself, stay away from your mother when you go out, you are mine. Lu Ziqin leaned his head against Gu Huayu's hand and rubbed it, like a coquettish cat. Gu Huayu was petrified by Lu Ziqin's movements, and her heart felt like it had fallen into a pile of cotton, soft and warm. Lu Ziqin smiled like a flower, looked at the dumbfounded Gu Huayu, and asked in a low voice, what's wrong? Gu Huayu raised her hands and put her arms around Lu Ziqin's neck, buried her head in his chest, and murmured, Qinjian, your smile is so beautiful, I'm going to die. What should I do? Lu Ziqin lowered his head and whispered, then take your life. Before Lu Ziqin finished speaking, Gu Huayu straightened up and pulled Lu Ziqin towards the inner room, Lonicera is coming, you go inside to take shelter. Gu Huayu pulled Lu Ziqin into the back room, looked around, pushed Lu Ziqin to the bed, lie down. Lu Ziqin obediently lay down on the bed. Gu Huayu pulled off the quilt and covered him, and warned, don't make any sound. Lu Ziqin responded, okay. Gu Huayu settled down with Lu Ziqin, opened the door and went out. After a while, Ling Dong led his servants in with midnight snacks and said, Princess, you didn't eat much for dinner. My servant made some braised skewers for you. It was made according to the way the princess went to Islam, and there was also a bowl of white fungus porridge. Princess, try it. Gu Huayu pointed to the table in front of her, Okay, put it here, thank you. Seeing that Gu Huayu was willing to eat, Liandong happily put the things over and said, thank you for what you are doing. Taking care of the princess is the responsibility of the servants. The princess will try it and see what she did wrong. I will pay attention to it next time. Gu Huayu looked at the skewers in the pot and said, I'll eat it later. You go down and rest first, and come back to clean it up tomorrow morning. Lonicera bowed her knees and said, my slave, I'll take my leave now. Good night, princess. When Lonicera had gone away, Gu Huayu turned around and went into the back room, shouting to Luzikin who was on the bed, he's gone, get up, there's something delicious to eat. Luzikin heard the conversation between Gu Huayu and Lonicera and sat up, what are braised skewers? Do you like to eat them? Gu Huayu nodded, well, it tastes good. Come and try it. The two returned to the living room. Luzikin curiously looked at the small stove on the table and the pot on the small stove, and asked, isn't it hot to eat this on a hot day? Hot, if you are by the river, eating skewers with the river breeze, it will feel very comfortable. When the word shuang came to her lips, Gu Huayu paused and changed it to comfortable. Luzikin sat down. Gu Huayu mixed the dipping sauce for him and asked, is it a little spicy? Luzikin nodded, okay, I can eat spicy food. For a late night snack, just a little spicy is fine. Too spicy will make your stomach uncomfortable, Gu Huayu said as she put the prepared dipping sauce in front of Luzikin. He then took a few skewers of meat and put them on the plate in front of Luzikin, dip it in the sauce like this and try it. Does it suit your taste? Luzikin followed Gu Huayu's example and ate it. When the meat entered his mouth, it was immediately filled with delicious aroma. His taste buds were immediately awakened. Luzikin perked up and nodded to Gu Huayu and said, it's delicious. Seeing that he was eating in a hurry, Gu Huayu reminded him, slow down, be careful not to burn it. Luzikin slowed down and said while eating, this pot is good, where did you buy it? Gu Huayu asked Luo Heiran to make the pot. It is made of special food-grade steel, which cannot be made with the craftsmanship of this era. Gu Huayu joked, when I was in the south of the Yangtze River, I bought it from the caravan going out to sea. I also bought this furnace from them. Nowadays, according to Gu Huayu's principle, anything that cannot be explained can be attributed to the caravan going out to sea. Since no one around me has ever been to the sea, there is no way to verify the truth of the matter. As expected, Luzikin didn't ask any more questions. The two of them ate and talked until the end of Haimo, when they stopped. Luzikin looked at his watch and said, it's so late, I have to go back. Gu Huayu stood up and said, okay, I'll see you off. Gu Huayu sent Luzikin to the wall. Luzikin looked up at the tall tree and said worriedly, what should I do? I can't climb trees. Gu Huayu smiled and reached out to open the door on the side, no need to climb the tree, come out from here. Luzikin's eyes widened in surprise, is there a door here? When did you pretend it was done? Why didn't I see it? As he said that, Luzikin stepped forward and touched it. The door felt similar to the wall. Gu Huayu explained, it has been a while since I dyed the door the same color as the wall and then processed it. It can't be seen without looking carefully. Luzikin nodded with satisfaction, this is good. You don't have to climb the wall when you come back. When Luzikin was about to go out, he whispered to Gu Huayu, I'll be back tomorrow night, remember to leave the door open for me. Gu Huayu smiled and nodded, okay, come here at Yamo. Luzikin raised his hand and rubbed Gu Huayu's head, go back, I'm leaving. I'll take you to the car. Luzikin stopped him and said, no, it's not good for others to see. Gu Huayu nodded, okay, then I'll watch you get in the car. Luzikin returned to Chinquo Duke's mansion. Jin saw that Luzikin's clothes were torn and asked, why are my clothes torn? Luzikin looked back at Ryujin, didn't answer, and continued walking forward. Ryuyan looked at Ryuxian and asked, "What's wrong?" Rugjuan reminded softly, "If you don't want to go to Longzi like Ryuan, just shut up and don't ask questions that shouldn't be asked. Understand?" Ryuyan nodded belatedly, "Oh. I understand." In the following days, Luzikin stayed at the Chinkuo Palace to read during the day, went out at the beginning of the day every night, and returned to the Chinkuo Palace at the end of the day. The Dichang Bank on Mahang Street opened on the 8th day of June. The affairs of the bank were managed by Hua Daitong. Gu Huayu did not intervene. On the 10th day of the 6th lunar month, it was time for Mrs. Ping Laoping to fold gauze over her eyes. When she got up in the morning, Mrs. Wang walked around Mrs. Ping with anticipation and worry, and asked, "Yan Ran, can my mother's eyes really see?" "Should be able to." Gu Huayu asked someone to close the curtains, leaving only a crack. Before Gu Huayu was about to fold the gauze cloth, she said to Mrs. Ping, "Grandma, close your eyes. I will ask you to open them later, and you can open them again." Mrs. Ping nodded in agreement. Gu Huayu folded off the gauze and said, "Grandma, slowly open your eyes." Mrs. Ping slowly opened her eyes and saw the light. When she saw the person in front of her, she was so excited that she burst into tears. "I can see again. Yan Ran, let Grandma take a good look at you." Gu Huayu knelt down and wiped Mrs. Ping's tears while saying with a smile, "I'm here. Grandma, please take a good look. Grandma's eyes are just fine. Don't cry. Crying too much is bad for your eyes." When Mrs. Wang heard that crying was not good for Mrs. Ping's eyes, she quickly wiped the corners of her eyes and said with a smile, "Mom, listen to Yan Ran. Don't cry. It's a big joy, we want to be happy." Gu Dichang and Wan agreed, "It's a big joy, we should be happy." Princess, Mrs. Ping of Shi Mansion, Princess Jinglian, the second wife, and the third young lady have come over. A servant came in to report. After hearing this, Mrs. Ping stood up and said, "I'll go out to greet you." Gu Huayu stopped her and said, "Grandma, we can't do it now. The sun outside is too dazzling. Your old eyes have just seen the light, so you can't go out yet." Mrs. Wang said, "Yan Ran is staying in the house with my mother-in-law. We can just go and greet her." Mrs. Wang took Wan and others out to greet the guests. Gu Huayu asked someone to open the curtains and asked, "What do you think, Grandma? Is it dazzling?" Mrs. Ping shook her head, "It's not dazzling." Gu Huayu lowered her head to check and said, "Grandma's eyes are fine. You should always keep this. If your eyes feel uncomfortable, put a drop into them." Gu Huayu handed a bottle of eye drops to Mrs. Ping. Mrs. Ping took it, looked at it carefully for a while, and then asked, "Yan Ran, do you want to put it in your eyes?" "Yes, this is eye drops, just drop it like this." As she said that, Gu Huayu put a drop into her own eye to show Mrs. Ping how to do it. Mrs. Ping thanked her and put away the eye drops. Mrs. Ping entered the house, ran straight to Mrs. Ping, took Mrs. Ping's hand and asked excitedly, "Auntie, can you really see it?" Mrs. Ping nodded, "Yes, I can see. Last time, Master Minghui said that I can enjoy blessings in my old age. I was still thinking, if I am blind, where will blessings come from? No, Yan Ran is back and my eyes are healed. I can really enjoy a few days of happiness." Mrs. Ping nodded repeatedly. "Master Minghui is an eminent monk, and his mouth is as if it has been enlightened. Master said you can enjoy blessings, and you will definitely enjoy blessings." Mrs. Ping turned to look at Mrs. Wang and said, "I will burn incense at Cin Temple another day. I would like to thank the Bodhisattva for blessing Yan Ran well, and thank the Master for his kind words." "Okay, now that your eyesight has healed, it will be easier to go anywhere. When Mrs. Ping saw Princess Jinglian coming in, she stepped forward to greet Princess Jinglian. After a while of greetings, everyone took their seats. Gu Huayu took advantage of everyone's family activities to pull Shi Yamei aside and asked in a low voice, "How are you and Mr. Ye doing?" Shi Yamei's face turned red as fast as the naked eye could see. Seeing Shi Yamei's shy look, Gu Huayu smiled and bumped her with her shoulder. "Okay? Aren't you angry?" Shi Yamei blushed and nodded. "Well, I'm not angry anymore." Gu Huayu leaned over and asked, "When will Mr. Ye come to propose marriage?" Shi Yamei's face turned redder, her head lowered, and she whispered, "I don't know, how can I ask him this? It's like I can't get married." Gu Huayu asked in a low voice, "How many times have you seen each other recently?" Shi Yamei blushed and looked at Gu Huayu. "3 times. What are you two muttering about?" "Third sister, my aunt is asking you something." Yang Jing reached out and patted Shi Yamei. Shi Yamei looked up at Yang Jing and whispered for help. "What did aunt say?" Then she looked at Mrs. Wang's silly smile, and then pricked up her ears to listen to what Yang Jing told her about Mrs. Wang's question. "My aunt said that her cousin's son returned to Beijing from abroad this year and joined the Ministry of Household Affairs as a doctor. He has not yet discussed the marriage. Would you like to meet him?" Mrs. Ping asked with interest. "Sister-in-law, is it the child from Shulan's family? Where did he get the second place in the last subject?" "Thanks to Dong0900 Dong for the reward. Thank you, thank you. Many thanks. Thank you all for your votes. Thank you very much." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 226. Chapter 226 Anger 1. Mrs. Wang smiled and nodded. She is Shulan's child. She went to Huzhu to be a county magistrate. She served for 3 years and her political achievements were outstanding every year. This year, the emperor caught up with the young man and transferred him back to the capital from Huzhu. He was promoted from the 7th rank to the 5th rank as a doctor in Hubyu, jumping 3 levels in a row. Tisk, 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 this child is amazing. Among children of the same age, he is simply outstanding. We are both from a family of military commanders. How come this kid is so smart? Mrs. Ping praised her repeatedly in admiration. Princess Jinglian asked, "The second best in the last subject?" Mrs. Ping reminded, "Lu Yu, the son of Lu Guangliang's family, has just been transferred from the Jiangyi camp to the Ministry of War as a minister." "Oh, it's him, I remembered it." "Third sister, Lu Yu is a rare young talent. When the new Jinshi was paraded through the streets, the princess and I both went to see it. The second placed boy was the most handsome. The princess also joked, 'You are so good looking, you should be a prostitute.'" Yang Jing took the words with a smile. Gu Huayu was happy for Ye Minghao. If this guy hadn't coaxed Yamei a few days earlier and added a strong rival, would he still be able to marry a wife? Shi Yamei blushed and shook her head. "Thank you, aunt, I have someone in my heart." Mrs. Ping's eyes immediately glanced over. "You have someone in your heart? Who?" "Lulu. I can tell you, your Aunt Chan told me that Lulu has someone in your heart for a long time. That person is not you. You should give up your heart as soon as possible. Don't do it, no more nonsense." Princess Jinglian asked gossipingly, "Mother, did Mrs. Ye tell you? There is someone in Lulu's heart? Did Mrs. Ye tell you whose girl it is?" Gu Huayu looked at Mrs. Ping nervously, fearing that she would say her name. Mrs. Ping shook her head. "I don't know, and Yeshan doesn't know either. Lulu said the time hasn't come yet. When the time comes, he will tell her naturally." Gu Huayu's tense heart relaxed, and she reached out to pick up the teacup and sip the tea. Yang Jing noticed something keenly and asked. The marriage between Lulu and Mrs. Wang Sunny has become tainted. Does this have anything to do with it? It's not the rumor that the 8 characters conflict with each other, right? Mrs. Ping said ambiguously, maybe, this is the best way to put it, and no one will be embarrassed. I heard from Yeshan that this marriage was arranged privately by the British father without Lulu's consent. Yeshan didn't say much else. Third girl, if the person in your heart is Lulu, you really need to give up as soon as possible. Even the British Duke couldn't do anything to Lulu, let alone others. Princess Jinglian said, what if the person in Lulu's heart is the third sister? Yang Jing took over the words, it's not impossible. Mrs. Ping shook her head and said, it's impossible. During those years when the 3 girls were chasing Lulu, Yeshan personally asked Lulu. Yang Jing turned to look at Shi Yame, third sister. The eldest son of Lu Shilang's family is as good as Lulu in terms of talent and appearance. How about we go and take a look? Shi Yame shook his head, don't look at it. I told you that there is someone in my heart. Girl, who do you really think of? Why don't you see him coming to propose marriage? Mrs. Ping asked with a stern face. Third sister, does the person in your heart have a home? Yang Jing asked worriedly. Seeing that Yang Jing's question was off track, Gu Huayu hurriedly said, second sister-in-law is already worried, how could Yame do such an unmeasured thing? By the way, I have gifts for aunt and 2 sisters-in-law. Lonisara, you go to my yard. Take the brocade box from the table outside. Lonisara retreated in response. Princess Jinglian asked, Yan Ran, what gift is it, fragrant dew? Gu Huayu smiled and shook her head, no, it's a skincare product. The effect is very good. My aunt has been using it for a few days, and her facial skin has improved a lot. Mrs. Ping turned to look at Mrs. Wang, I just said, I haven't seen my sister-in-law for a few days, and she feels younger. I thought she had fewer things to worry about and was in a good mood. It turned out to be the use of skincare products. Yang Jing walked up to Mrs. Wang and took a closer look and said, it's true, the fine lines on my aunt's face have faded a lot. Princess Jinglian then came forward to take a closer look. Landong came over with a brocade box, and Gu Huayu asked her to put the brocade box on the table. Mrs. Ping walked over and opened the brocade box curiously, Yan Ran, is this for me? Yes, cleansers, skin toners, various essences, day creams and night creams, Gu Huayu replied. Others followed and gathered around. After Gu Huayu introduced them one by one, she wiped half of Mrs. Ping's face on the spot. Like a magic trick, Gu Huayu made Mrs. Ping's face distort under the gaze of everyone. Look at my aunt's face, the side where skincare products have been used has become firmer, and the side where skincare products have not been used has drooped skin. This is the effect of using it once. Starting from today, use it every morning and evening. In half a year, it will not be a problem to look 10 years younger. Mrs. Ping touched her face with her hands and asked, really? Gu Huayu nodded firmly, really. I have to keep using it every day. When my grandmother is the age, she will look similar to you now, or even younger. Princess Jinglian asked urgently, Xiao, where can I buy this? Gu Huayu shook her head and replied, there is no way to sell it outside. I developed it. The raw materials are too precious and hard to find, so I don't plan to sell it. I will use it for my own family. Princess Jinglian begged, can you give me an extra portion? I want to give it to my mother-in-law. Gu Huayu thought for a while and nodded, okay, give 2 shares to the princess and 2 shares to the second sister-in-law. Yang Jing hugged Gu Huayu and said, Xiao, I want to thank you on behalf of my mother. While everyone was discussing skincare products, Shi Yame pulled Gu Huayu aside and asked in a low voice, Xiao, that wood hasn't mentioned the marriage proposal yet, what should I do? Gu Huayu wanted to tease her a few words, but seeing Shi Yame's anxious look, she finally held back and said with relief, "Don't worry, I'll ask Lulu later. Let Lulu remind Miu Miu." Shi Yame gratefully hugged Gu Huayu and shook her. "Xiao, thank you." Gu Huayu smiled and said, "Come on, I can't thank you enough for just one sentence." Shi Yame looked at Gu Huayu, lowered his head and asked, "Xiao, have you seen Lulu often?" Gu Huayu looked around cautiously, and then replied, "Why do you ask this?" Seeing Gu Huayu's nervous look, Shi Yame suddenly thought of something and asked, "Is the person in Lulu's heart yours?" Shi Yame's words were so shocking that Gu Huayu quickly reached out to cover her mouth and reminded her in a panic, "Keep your voice down." The more Shi Yame thought about it, the more she felt that her guess was right. She knew Luzikan, and she had never seen him treat any girl favorably, except for Gu Huayu. As for Gu Huayu, if there is nothing wrong with her, why are she so panicked? Shi Yame rolled his eyes and lowered his voice, "Really?" Gu Huayu let go of her hand. Before she could reply, Princess Jinglian looked up, raised the firming and lightening essence and facial cream in her hand and asked, "Xiao, should I use this before or this before?" Gu Huayu said to Shi Yame, "Don't make random guesses." Then she walked over to talk to Princess Jinglian. Shi Yame looked at Gu Huayu and murmured to himself, "Is that true or not?" Mrs. Ping and her party had lunch in Wutong Lane before leaving. During the period, Mrs. Ping said that there will be a literary and flower party at Shi Mansion on June 12, and she would like to go down to Shi Mansion from Wutong Lane to be a guest. Gu Huayu understood that Mrs. Ping wanted to take the opportunity to introduce her to everyone and gradually bring her into the circle of aristocratic families in the capital. Old Madame Ping led the people in Wutong Lane to send Mrs. Ping and her entourage to the gate. Mrs. Ping warned, "Auntie, come here early the day after tomorrow." Mrs. Ping responded with a smile, "You are thoughtful, Yingzi. My aunt understands your good intentions. I will take everyone there earlier." "Mother, the people from Huafu seem to be here." Yang Jing turned around and saw Huafu's carriage, reminding Mrs. Ping who was talking. Mrs. Ping turned around and looked over and said, "It's really Huafu's car. It looks like the person coming is Lu." Everyone stood there, watching the maid help Mrs. Lu get out of the car and hand the crutch to Mrs. Lu. After Mrs. Lu stood firm on crutches, she saluted everyone with a smile and asked, "Mrs. Ping is going back home?" Mrs. Ping smiled and replied, "I was going back to the house, but Mrs. Lu has arrived." "Why do I want to talk to Mrs. Lu? Come on, let's invite her to the house." Lu was extremely reluctant to deal with Ping Jiying and wished she would leave as soon as possible. He smiled apologetically and said, "That's not necessary. Madam Ping, if you have something to do, you can go and do your work. I came here just to visit Mrs. Ping and to say hello to the princess." "Where is the princess? Isn't she in the mansion?" Gu Huayu took a step forward from Shi Yame and asked, "Hello, Mrs. Lu, we meet again." Mrs. Lu looked at Gu Huayu, her eyes widened in shock, and her mouth opened wide enough to stuff an egg. After a while, he said, You. Gu Huayu said with a half smile, "Mrs. Lu still remembers me, that's good." Mrs. Ping looked at Gu Huayu, then at Mrs. Lu, tilted her head and asked Mrs. Ping, "Gu, has Yan Ran met Mrs. Lu?" Mrs. Ping shook her head, "I don't know. It looks like I've seen it before." Mrs. Lu leaned on a crutch with one hand and touched her bun with the other to cover up her embarrassment after the shock. Said, "So you are Yan Ran, you should tell Aunt that day." As soon as Mrs. Lu said the word aunt, Gu Huayu interrupted her, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lu, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't recognize a kiss randomly. I, Hua Yan Ran, will not do anything like recognizing a thief as my father. I checked and my grandparents only had one father. Furthermore, My grandfather is a very clean man and has never had any good relationships with other women except my grandmother. Therefore, I will not have any relatives such as uncles, and aunts. Mrs. Lu was shocked when she saw Hua Yanran. At this moment, she was angry after being humiliated. Liu's face turned blue and white, and she pointed at Gu Huayu. You. Gu Huayu raised her chin and asked, "What's wrong with me? Did I say something wrong? You want to say that I am uneducated? Or do you want to say that I don't respect you and respect you? I have already said that I will not recognize relatives randomly. You and I are just like each other. A stranger blocked the door of my house. I didn't let anyone drive you away. I was already being extremely polite. What else do you want? Mrs. Lu, when others give you face and opportunities, you must know how to cherish and be grateful. Don't be like some white-eyed wolves who do all the bad things in your life and end up with a bad death." Hearing this, Ms. Liu's face turned pale and she said angrily, "What are you talking about?" Gu Huayu sneered, "Are you talking nonsense? What I said happens rarely in this world. I just felt it." Mrs. Liu's face is so ugly. Does she think my words have reached you? Or have you got it right? That's your problem. Lu was extremely angry and cursed without restraint. "You self-righteous yellow-haired girl, do you think it's great to be named a princess? Just because you can be tyrannical in the capital? Don't you know what you are? A pheasant that grew up in a rural mountain village cannot become a phoenix even if it is covered with gold. You really think of yourself as a person? Do you think it's for your sake that I can come to see you today? I do it for the sake of your dead parents. You are an ungrateful person, who cares to come to see you?" "Try to curse again." Mrs. Ping stepped forward and shouted angrily at Mrs. Lu. Gu Huayu pulled Mrs. Ping behind her. "Auntie, it's okay. You don't need to protect me. I can handle protecting an old witch." "Who are you calling an old witch?" "Huh. You're an uneducated person." Mrs. Lu pointed at Gu Huayu angrily. Gu Huayu raised her chin and said slowly and quietly, "Of course it's you. Can't even hear such obvious words? That's because you didn't study when you were a kid, right? This man, it is still necessary to read more books. Read more and at least understand the language. Like Mrs. Lu, who can't even understand a sentence, how difficult is it for your family to talk to you? Don't your family members find you annoying? By the way, Mrs. Liu's daughter-in-law is a noble daughter of a British prince. As a mother-in-law, you should be cautious in front of Mrs. Lu and flatter her in every possible way. Mrs. Lu will naturally not dislike her." Shi Yamei smiled and said, "That's not necessarily the case. Maybe I'd be more disgusted with this." Gu Huayu looked at Mrs. Lu and asked, "Mrs. Lu defends her everywhere, flatters her everywhere and is despised by others. You can imagine the days to come, it will be miserable. I went crazy to take you back to Huafu. I don't know what is good or bad," Mrs. Lu said angrily. After finishing speaking, Mrs. Lu yelled to the maid, "Help me get into the car, let's go back." Gu Huayu raised her voice and said, "Let's go slowly without seeing her off. Mrs. Lu, please remember that my grandparents only gave birth to my father, and Hua Yanran has no uncles. In the future, please Mrs. Lu not to marry randomly." Lu Shi turned to look at Gu Huayu. "I want to see how long you can laugh." Gu Huayu met Liu's gaze and replied, "Mrs. Lu, please keep your eyes open and I will make your wish come true." After Mrs. Lu drove away, Mrs. Ping asked, "Yanran, when did you see Mrs. Lu?" Gu Huayu said, "When she first came to Beijing, she stood up for the Lu family and I caught her when she was bullying the girls from the Chen family." Yang Jing asked worriedly, "Would it be bad if Xiao and Mrs. Lu break up?" Princess Jinglian said, "What's wrong? I think it's good to break up. See you later and don't have to cater to you against your will."
If you don't like it, you just don't like it. She uses her single plank bridge, and we use our Yangguan road. Yang Jing explained, I'm worried that she will play dirty tricks on Xiao. My grandfather often said that it is better to offend a gentleman than a villain. Gu Huayu smiled and said, second sister-in-law, don't worry about me. I know how to protect myself. No matter she uses conspiracy or conspiracy, I have never been afraid of her. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 227. Chapter 227 Anger 2. Shi Yame put her arm around Gu Huayu's shoulders and said, I like Xiao's temperament. If she dares to play tricks on you, let's play together to kill her. MRS Ping took over the message with a smile, Xiao, be careful when you go out later. Don't be careless. The men at home are leaving the office, and we have to go back. If you have anything to say, let's talk about it later. After sending everyone away from the Shi mansion, Gu Huayu supported MRS Ping and walked back. Back in the upper room, MRS Ping left Gu Huayu behind and asked, Yan Ran, why did you anger MRS Lu today? Also, when you talked to MRS Lu, there was something in your words. How much did you find out about your parents? Gu Huayu replied, to anger her, firstly, I don't want to deal with her, and I don't want to be in vain with her. Furthermore, when I said those words, I also wanted to deceive her and see if she would make any move. There is not much about my father and mother. Progress. MRS Ping nodded, that's right, your father and mother's affairs have been going on for many years, and it is difficult to find any clues. It is also a way to force the other party into chaos. Just, you have to be more careful and don't be careless. If something happens to you again, Grandma really won't survive. Gu Huayu said with relief, Grandma, don't worry, I know what's going on and I won't let anything happen to me. MRS Ping put down the cup in her hand, stretched out her hand to hold Gu Huayu's hand, and whispered, Yan Ran, you will have hair extensions in a few months. At this age, you can discuss marriage. As soon as Gu Huayu heard about the marriage proposal, she immediately thought of Lu Liu's previous worries, and as expected, he was right. Gu Huayu said coquettishly, Grandma, we just got together. I don't want to discuss marriage so early. I want to stay with Grandma for a few more years. MRS Ping, why don't you want to keep your granddaughter for a few more years, but it's so hard to find a good son? For her granddaughter's happiness, she had to plan more for her. Then he said, hey, if there is a suitable family, let's settle the marriage as soon as possible. After the marriage is settled, it will take 2 or 3 years to go through the 3 letters and 6 rites. Yan Ran, some people miss it for the rest of their lives. Besides, my grandmother is in the capital and she won't go anywhere else. You can still see her when you get married. Seeing that acting coquettishly didn't work, Gu Huayu had to say, Grandma, I carry a deep hatred of blood on my body, so I shouldn't discuss marriage with others, so as not to drag others down. Let's talk about this again after I've avenged my great revenge, okay? Anyway, I am only 15 this year, so I have plenty of time. MRS Ping sighed, hey, you are right. The child of your aunt and sister is a rare and good child. I wanted to propose marriage to third girl, but third girl has someone in mind, so I just want to talk to you. You are right, our current situation is not good enough to cause trouble to others. It's just that such a good man, it's a pity to miss him. Seeing MRS Ping's disappointed look, Gu Huayu smiled and comforted her, Grandma, don't worry. Your granddaughter is smart, well-behaved and sensible. She will definitely find a good match. MRS Ping was amused by Gu Huayu. She smiled and patted Gu Huayu's hand and said, you girl, how can you praise yourself like this? However, what you said is also true. We Yan Ran, are such a good girl, whoever marries him will be lucky. The grandfather and grandson chatted and laughed for a while, and Mrs. Ping got tired of talking. Gu Huayu waited on Mrs. Ping to rest before returning to her small courtyard. Lu came out of Wutong Lane, and when the car reached the branch road at Zhouqiao, she raised her voice and said, "Go to the British government palace." The driver quickly turned around and headed towards the British government. Mrs. Li was serving Mrs. Yang in Rong'an Hall. After hearing the report, she looked at Mrs. Yang on the soft couch and said, "Bring my sister to Rong'an Hall." Mrs. Yang didn't want outsiders to see her embarrassment, so she stopped her and said, "Wait a minute. You have been busy all day, so go back and rest." With Liu's talk, Ziqiu has not returned for some days. By the way, ask Liu's, is Ziqiu and his aunt? Ms. Li bowed down and said, "Yes, my daughter-in-law listens to her mother." Mr. Li came out of Rong'an Hall and personally greeted her at the second gate. When Mrs. Lu saw Li coming, she greeted her and said, "Why did sister come out in person?" Mrs. Li hurriedly stepped forward to help Mrs. Lu. "Why did you come here before your legs healed well? Have someone carry a soft sedan over here." Li turned around and gave instructions. After a while, several strong women came over carrying a soft sedan and carried Ms. Lu to Yujingyuan. The women then carried Ms. Lu into the house. After the maid served the tea, Grandma Fang left with the maid and her mother-in-law. Ms. Lu waited for the maid and mother-in-law to step back and asked, "Is sister okay?" Li gave a long sigh, "What else can be good?" He did such a shameless thing, which made everyone in the house unable to hold their heads up. Since the day of the accident, Ms. Zhu took Qiuqiu back to her parents' home and has not returned yet. The old lady leaned forward and lay on the bed, unable to move. The whole house was in a state of chaos. Alas, it's really hard to describe in words. After speaking, Ms. Li picked up the tea on the table and sipped it. She drank a few sips before suppressing the anger in her heart. Lu Shi sighed and asked, "Zhu Shi has gone back, has Xiran gone to pick her up?" Speaking of the Zhu family, the resentment that Li had finally suppressed rose again. "How could I not go? If I did, I would let Xiran go the next day." Mr. Zhu hid from Xiran, but Xiran didn't even see Qiuqiu. He came back disgraced and vowed not to pick her up again. Tell me, this Zhu family is not young anymore. When something happens, she goes to her parents' house to hide. Like what words? Qiuqiu is already so old, is it possible that she will live in her parents' house from now on? Mr. Li was full of complaints and angrily expressed her frustration and dissatisfaction. Liu's gentle words comforted her, "Zhu is young and doesn't think things through. My sister, don't get angry with her." Li took another sip of tea and said, "Who is young? The fruit is all over the floor, why are you still young? There is also Yashi, if your married daughter has been wronged by her husband's family, if you are dissatisfied, you should be scolded or beaten when you come to the door, but you should have an attitude and a charter. Right? What's the point of letting your daughter live in her parents' house without paying any attention to it? She usually looks like a smart person, but she is so confused when it comes to things." Ms. Li paused for a moment, then continued, "The old immortal in Rong Antang only sees her harming her son. She did such a shameful thing, so she didn't preach. She was worried that he would be wronged. A loving mother often loses her son. This statement is absolutely true. Mrs. Lu knows Mrs. Yang's temperament. Her children are like her eyes. If anyone dares to say anything wrong, she will jump up and fight with them. Sister knows her temper, why should I get angry with her?" Ms. Li sighed and said, "My fate is not good. They say that men are afraid of getting into the wrong profession, and women are afraid of marrying the wrong man. I have chosen the wrong person in my life. This duke's mansion looks very glamorous to outsiders. In the mainland, there are a lot of troubles that make people extremely annoyed. Alas, I won't talk anymore. The more I talk about it, the more uncomfortable I feel. Ms. Lee sighed dejectedly, and the bitterness in her heart made her want to cry. Mrs. Lu comforted her and said, "Every family has troubles, so sister, I have to look for the bright side and think about the good. You see, if the Prime Minister's house comes to cancel the engagement, the Duke will no longer favor the eldest son, which is always good for Xiren Zigzun." Li nodded. "These days, this matter makes me feel better." Lao Lu lost his marriage to Wang Xiangfu, which completely chilled the old man's heart. These days, the old man is much pleased with Zigzun and Yan. It's just a pity that the errand was lost, and the old man took back the things given to him. Xiren, who has nothing to do all day long, feels very depressed. The smile on Mrs. Li's face went away when she talked about Lu Xiren. Lu Shi reminded, "I heard from Brother Ming that the Duke of Guo's people are still looking for that woman. Ziran doesn't know, right? Sister, please take good care of Xiren. She is just a woman. If she dies, she will die. Don't let Xiren get involved again." Ms. Li sat up straight and looked up at Ms. Lu. "These days, I am serving that old man in the backyard and I don't know anything about the outside world. Has the woman not been found yet? Does Xiren's depression have something to do with her? Probably not. Now Xiren is confined in the house by the old man and is not allowed to go out. All the people serving in Xiren's courtyard were killed by the Duke after the accident. He should have no contact with that woman anymore." "All killed?" Mrs. Liu's hair stood on end when she heard this, and she nodded. "That's good. Where is the child?" Ming brother said that the child is most likely Xiren's. He looks very much like Xiren, and he is also smart. When mentioning the child, Mrs. Li's face darkened a bit, and she said in annoyance, "That night, the Duke of Guo had someone deal with it. No matter whether the child is Xiren's or not, we can't keep it. Yes, looking at that child always reminds me of things I don't want to remember. If you want to blame it, it's because the child was born in the wrong child." Mrs. Liu's neck has grown long in anticipation of her grandson, and she feels a little pity for her child. Seeing Liu's expression, Mrs. Li asked, "Zikiu's stomach hasn't moved yet?" Lu Shi shook her head, "Not yet." Li frowned and asked, "Brother Ming still goes to Hualu often?" Ms. Lu quickly shook her head and defended her son. "Brother Ming has been very well behaved recently and almost always stays in the house." Li's face softened a lot. "I hope they can do well and have a baby soon, so I don't have to worry too much." "Where are your legs? What did the doctor say?" "The doctor said it's best not to go to the ground." "You too, the doctor asked you not to go to the ground, why didn't you listen? It took 100 days to break your muscles and bones, how long have you been doing? You must cherish your own body. If you really want to leave sequelae, you will be the one who suffers." Li didn't wait for Lu to finish, and scolded her. "Mr. Li is really kind to Ms. Lu and always thinks of her." Lu Shi sighed, "I also want to take good care of her, but now I can't help myself, just like my sister. There are always troubles coming to my door. How can I feel at ease? You don't have any parents-in-law who need you to take care of you. Who can take care of you in the house? Who dares to disobey you? What can trouble you?" Li asked in confusion. Ms. Lu sighed again and told Ms. Li about Gu Huayu. Ms. Li sat up straight in shock. "Didn't they say they were all dead after the accident? How come they are still alive?" Lu Shi shook her head, "I don't know either. My sister knows it. When the incident happened, Huasu and I were not in the capital, and we don't know much about the capital." Ms. Li thought for a while, shook her head and said, "It's been so many years, and I can't remember exactly what happened back then. This girl's fate is so great." "What? You went to pick her up, and she didn't come back?" Lu Shi nodded and said, Yes. The day after the emperor made her the princess, Brother Ming came to pick her up. Today I went to pick her up in person again, but that girl didn't even let me in. She said many unpleasant things at the door in front of the people of Shi Mansion. Sister, tell me, does Nizai know anything? Ms. Li thought for a moment, shook her head and said, after so many years, we don't know much, so what can she know? That Nizai is 15 this year, right? What can a 15-year-old girl know? When you and I were 15, what were we not ignorant about? But the words she said were really unpleasant. Li said, the unpleasant words may not have been said by her. With Ping Jiying here, it is not surprising that she said any unpleasant things. That Nizai doesn't want to go back to Huafu, maybe it's the idea of her aunt and nephew from the Ping family. How has Mrs. Ping lived these years? It's not like you don't know. Now that she has someone she can rely on, she can escape from the world and live a decent life. How can they let you take her away? Mrs. Lu looked at Mrs. Li and asked, so it's Mrs. Ping and Mrs. Ping who are causing trouble, so Nizai doesn't want to go back to Hua Mansion. Most likely. Ms. Lu asked, what should we do? Let her do this? Stop answering. Now that we've said it, let her take on whatever else she wants. Lu Shi shook her head, no, we have to find a way to take him back. Ms. Li looked at Ms. Lu and asked, why do you insist on taking her back? Lu Shi thought for a while, leaned towards Li Shi, and whispered, that girl may have a dragon pattern order in her hand. This is something held by the head of the Hua family, and she can order the dragon shadow guards up and down. Li Shi asked in confusion, isn't Brother Ming the commander of the dragon shadow guard? Brother Ming doesn't have the dragon mark order in his hand. Lu Shi explained, Brother Ming's father was the commander-in-chief back then. He was appointed by the emperor's decree and was not inherited. 15 years have passed since this happened. Does the dragon pattern order still have any influence on the dragon shadow guard? Lu Shi thought for a while and said truthfully, the dragon mark order has little impact on Brother Ming. Once I heard a conversation between Ming Gear's father and Chen's staff, saying that with the dragon mark order, he could get the map and key. I told Brother Ming about this, and Brother Ming said that this dragon pattern order is not simple. So I had to find a way to take Nizai back. Ms. Li nodded and said, in that case, we have to take that girl back. Mrs. Lu frowned and sighed, now the emperor has taken over the land deed of the old house on Yongchun Road, ordered people to rebuild the old house into a princess mansion, and gave it to Nizai. I have to take her back before the old house is built and find out the dragon pattern order. Otherwise, when Nizai moves into the princess's mansion, there will be no reason to take her back to the mansion. Xiaoming, you have to make two plans for this matter. It would be best if you can take that girl back. When someone enters Huafu, it is easy to find out what to do. If you can't take it back, how are you going to get the dragon mark order in her hand? Have you seen the dragon mark Ling Ling? What does it look like? I mean, are there any drawings or something? Xiaoming is the nickname of the Lu family. Lu shook his head, I haven't seen him, I just overheard a few words. Brother Ming's father left suddenly, and he didn't tell Brother Ming. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 228. Chapter 228 Worry. Li asked, where is the old man in Lunjing Guard? Have you ever seen the dragon mark order? Lu shook his head and said, I don't know. I have to go back and ask Brother Ming to find out. Li nodded, go back and ask Brother Ming to ask the old man of Lunjing Guard to draw the dragon pattern order, and then find someone to search Nizai's residence. Liu's eyes lit up, sister, this is a good idea. I'll go back and talk to Brother Ming. It's getting late, so I'll go back first. Sister is tired and needs a rest. Lu got the idea and wanted to return to Huafu immediately. Li Shi nodded and warned, "Go, don't show off in the future, take good care of your legs, and tell Brother Ming, Ziqiu and the others to do it if you have anything to do." After Mrs. Li finished her instructions, she shouted towards the door, "Here comes someone." Mother Fang opened the door and came in. She bent her knees and said, "Madam." Li ordered, "Send Xiao Ming back." Mammy Fang bent her knees and bowed, turned around and gave instructions. A strong woman came in and carried Ms. Lu to the courtyard. Li followed Mrs. Lu out, and after sending Lu away, Li whispered to Aunt Fang, "Let someone go and see if the Duke is in the house." Mother Fang bent her knees and said, "Yes, I understand." Mrs. Li returned to the house. After a while, the servant came back and reported, "Second Madam, the people from Wenyuan Pavilion said that the Duke of Guo went out after lunch and has not returned to the house yet." Li said, "I know, let people keep an eye on me. If the Duke of the country returns to the house, report him immediately." Mother Fang bent her knees and responded. Li turned to look at the hourglass, turned around and walked out. Mother Fang asked, "Where are you going, madam?" Ms. Li sighed and said calmly, "It's dinner time, go to Rong'an Hall to serve the old lady for dinner. You don't have to follow, you go and see Xiren and let him eat well." Mother Fang bent her knees and responded, "Old slave, I understand." Li went to serve Mrs. Yang for dinner, chatted with her for a while, and then came out of Rong'an Hall. Li Shi nodded and said, "Follow me to Wenyuan Pavilion." When the British Duke returned to the palace, his servants reported, "The second lady's people came to ask if the Duke is here." After hearing this, the British public asked, "Are there any guests in the house today?" The servant leaned back and said, "Mrs. Lu from Hua Mansion has been here." The British Duke nodded, "I understand, let's go down." When Li came over, Du Bin was waiting at the door. When he saw Li, Du Bin bowed and said, "Second Madam, please come in. The Duke is waiting for you in the study." Li went straight to the study. Li entered the British study room. Half an hour later, Gu Huayu in Wuitong Lane received the letter. Princess, what should we do next?" Qing Yu asked. Gu Huayu said, "Keep an eye on it and tell everyone to be careful. You can go down first." King Yu retreated. Gu Huayu leaned on the soft couch and began to think deeply. Lu left Wuitong Lane and went directly to the British embassy. After Lu left, Li went to see the British Duke again. What is the role of the British Duke in the affairs of the Hua family? Does the Hua family have conflicting interests with him? Did his father block his way? What is his motivation? Why did he want to put his father to death? A series of questions popped up, and Gu Huayu had a headache thinking about them, so she simply closed her eyes to rest. After a while, Gu Huayu heard Lu Ziqin's footsteps, followed by the sound of unlocking the door. Soon, a familiar breath came to her face. Gu Huayu opened her eyes, and saw an extremely handsome face in front of her. She asked with a smile, "Are you tired?" Gu Huayu raised her hand to hold Lu Ziqin's face, shook her head, "I'm not tired, I'm waiting for you." Lu Ziqin's eyes were full of tenderness. He sat down next to Gu Huayu and put her in his arms. He said dotingly, "You have a tired look on your brows, but you still say you're not tired. You've been busy all day today." Gu Huayu nestled in Lu Ziqin's arms and said lazily, "It's okay. Aunt Ping and her family came over in the morning and talked with them." Lu Ziqin stroked Gu Huayu's broken hair and asked, "Can the old lady's eyes see?" Gu Huayu nodded and said, "Yes, I can see it." Lu Ziqin lowered his head and kissed Gu Huayu, "Xiao's medical skills are amazing." Gu Huayu raised her eyebrows and looked at Lu Ziqin, "Grandma's cataract is just a minor surgery." Lu Ziqin smiled and said, "In the hands of people who know how to do it, it is naturally not difficult, but in the eyes of people who don't know how to do it, it is very difficult." Gu Huayu replied, that's right. Gu Huayu turned to look at Lu Zikin and said, Qinjian, I feel very sad when I see my grandmother crying with excitement today. LV Zikin understood Gu Huayu's mood. Yes, I understand. Eye diseases like my grandmother's are actually not complicated to deal with. Qinjian, Ruhi has good medical skills. I want to teach him what I know and let him open a medical clinic to help people like my grandmother. Is that okay? Ruhi is a member of Lu Zikin's family, and only after Lu Zikin's nod can he go out to see the doctor. Lu Zikin nodded and said, yes, this is a good thing to bring good fortune and virtue. Ruhi is given to you. From now on, he will be at your disposal. I will deed Ruhi's body to you later. Gu Huayu asked in surprise, what kind of contract is Ruhi? After Gu Huayu came into contact with Ruhi, she realized that his medical skills were very high. How could a person with such high medical skills sell himself? Lu Zikin replied, death contract, all of them are death contracts. I have been sick since I was a child. My grandfather was worried about me and chose many people to study medicine. Ruhi was the most talented and studied the hardest. His medical skills were not as good as those in the palace. The imperial doctor is poor. Gu Huayu understood clearly that Ruhi's medical skills were originally cultivated by the Ye family. Gu Huayu nodded and asked, how can Ye Shangshu choose all of them for you? Lu Zikin nodded, yes. Gu Huayu asked in confusion, you are a descendant of the British Duke. Shouldn't the people you command be arranged by the British Duke? Lu Zikin gave a wry smile and said, in the early years, Madame Yang was in charge of the media in the British government. The person assigned to me was very unsatisfactory. My mother was very angry and went to the British government to argue. The British father-in-law asked my mother to choose someone, and my grandfather asked Ryuan and others to come and serve me. Gu Huayu asked, Ye Shangshu is a civil servant, who taught Ryuan their martial arts? Lu Zikin looked down at Gu Huayu and said, the Ye family will pay tribute. Oh, Gu Huayu sat up straight and asked, is the Ye family offering sacrifices? It is not uncommon for wealthy families to hire martial artists to serve as nursing homes. Gu Huayu couldn't help but ask. Lu Zikin nodded, yes, my grandfather and grandmother were a loving couple. The only children I have are my uncle Ye Chang, my mother Ye Shan, and my empress Ye Yi. After my aunt married into the Prince of Qin's palace, my grandfather and grandmother started running the Chang'an restaurant, just to protect my aunt one day. Things are unpredictable, and the queen eventually died young. Gu Huayu sat up straight and asked, so, Chang'an restaurant is more than just a place to eat? Lu Zikin nodded, yes, Chang'an restaurant is like Longjingwei's Giun Pavilion. Of course, Chang'an restaurant has not been in business as long as Giun Pavilion, so it cannot be compared with Giun Pavilion, but its functions are similar. Chang'an restaurant is in your hands. Yes, when my grandfather was dying, he entrusted the Ye family to me. After my grandfather passed away, on May 7th, my grandmother handed over the Chang'an restaurant to me. Lu Zikin replied. So that's it? If you have medical skills, it would be a pity if you don't treat illnesses and save people. How about we open a medical clinic and invite a few doctors to help with the consultation? Gu Huayu brought the topic back. Lu Zikin said with a smile, I have given you the responsibility of handling me. You can arrange whatever you want. Gu Huayu hugged Lu Zikin and kissed her. Qinjian, you are so kind, thank you. Tomorrow I will ask Uncle Hua to look for. Before Gu Huayu could finish her words, Lu Zikin lowered his head and blocked her mouth, kissing her until Gu Huayu's face turned red and her heart pounded. Lu Zikin let go of Gu Huayu and whispered, girl, you are not allowed to thank me again in the future, remember. Is this a punishment of thanks? Gu Huayu looked at Lu Zikin in confusion, the legendary gentle punishment? Lu Zikin saw the stunned Gu Huayu, lowered his head and kissed her again, and asked in a hoarse voice, what's wrong? You're stupid. Gu Huayu raised her hands and put her arms around Lu Zikin's neck, gagging his words. Luzikin was stunned for a moment, and then responded, moving from passive to active in the city pool attack strategy. After lingering for a while, both of them stopped breathing. Luzikin lowered his head to look at Gu Huayu, who had a blushing face. His eyes were full of lust, and he got up and went to the bathroom. Gu Huayu leaned back on the soft couch, touched her hot face with her hands, took 2 deep breaths, and let her consciousness return. When Luzikin came back, Gu Huayu was already sitting on the soft couch, reaching out to push the teacup on the table. "Qinjian, drink tea." Luzikin sat back down next to Gu Huayu, picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea, and asked, "The banquet at Shi Mansion will be held for you tomorrow, right?" Gu Huayu nodded, "And Ping is interested and wants me to integrate into the circle of aristocratic families. Have you received the message? Will you go?" Luzikin nodded, "Yes, the government received a notice today about the banquet held for you. Of course I will go." Gu Huayu thought about Shi Yamei and asked, "When will your stupid cousin come to propose marriage? If he doesn't come to propose marriage, Aunt Ping will have to negotiate another marriage for Yamei." Luzikin patted his head, "I've been busy dating you these days, so I forgot about it. I'll tell my aunt about it when I get back." "Xiao, when can I come to propose marriage?" Gu Huayu smiled and said, "Let's talk about Yedamu now, and we'll talk about it later." Luzikin was thinking about coming to visit Mrs. Ping tomorrow. "Girl, how long will it be? Can you mention it in advance?" "Huh. How about just letting the old lady and Mrs. Wang know? Otherwise, I'm worried that they will negotiate a separate marriage for you." Gu Huayu was shocked by Luzikin's sensitivity and asked, "How did you know?" Luzikin just said casually, but he didn't expect to bump into him. He asked nervously, "Is the old lady really planning to propose a marriage for you? Whose family?" "Xiao, you promised me, you are yours, you are not allowed to negotiate for a marriage again." Seeing Luzikin's nervous look, Gu Huayu felt so happy that she nodded and said, "I remember that I didn't promise my grandmother and the others." Luzikin held Gu Huayu in his arms and asked seriously, "Really?" Gu Huayu nodded seriously, "Really?" Luzikin asked, "Whose house does the old lady want to discuss with you?" Gu Huayu winked at Luzikin and said with a playful smile, "I was stupid to tell you this big jealous thing." Luzikin bared his teeth in a fierce manner and threatened, "Little girl, are you going to tell me?" Gu Huayu raised her eyebrows and said arrogantly, "If you don't tell me, I won't tell you." "What will you do to me?" Luzikin asked with doting eyes, "Little girl, you are so arrogant because of your favor, aren't you?" Gu Huayu nodded repeatedly, "That's right, if you are favored by someone, why not be arrogant? I still want to be domineering under your favor. Is that okay?" Luzikin's jealousy dissipated and his heart was instantly filled. He smiled and said, "Okay, little girl, you can be domineering, but I will support you. Even if she has the ability to be domineering, she doesn't need anyone to back her up. But it feels so good to have someone pampering you." Gu Huayu smiled and said, "Okay, from now on I will light fires everywhere and cause trouble, and you will be responsible for putting out the fires." Luzikin rubbed Gu Huayu's head and said, "Okay, my little girl just has fun." Gu Huayu looked at Luzikin, and suddenly felt a little scared. If something happened to her, what would she and Luzikin do? Luzikin saw that Gu Huayu's smile froze and she just looked at him blankly, with a touch of sadness in her eyes. Her heart tightened and she asked, "Xiao, what's wrong?" Gu Huayu thought for a while and expressed her worries. "Qinjian, Mrs. Lu came to Wutong Lane today." Luzikin sat up straight and said seriously, "What is she doing here?" "To take you back to Hua Mansion." Gu Huayu shook her head and briefly explained her purpose of coming. Luzikin asked, "Has she seen you before?" Gu Huayu nodded, "In the Chen family yard on Yulon Lane, She stood up for Mr. Lu and came to find trouble for Chen Shui. Lu Zikan thought about what happened when he just returned to Beijing, pondered for a moment, and asked, Ms. Lu insists on taking you back to the palace. Is it because of the Dragon Mark order? Gu Huayu said, it should be. I used words to deceive her today because I wanted to see her reaction. After Ms. Lu left here, she went to the British government. Zikan explained, the second lady is Liu's cousin. Ms. Lu is a concubine of the Lu family. She heard that she was abused by her mistress in her natal family when she was a girl. The mother of the second lady took pity on Ms. Lu and took her to the Li mansion. Lu and the second wife grew up together. The two sisters had a very good relationship, and the second wife protected Lu at all times. Mr. Lu has been wronged by you, so it is reasonable for her to go to the British government to find the second wife to complain. Gu Huayu wanted to say something about Li going to meet the British father-in-law, but after the words came to her lips twice, she swallowed them back. The British government was his home, although he never found warmth in that home. But home is still home. She didn't want him to know that she had planted spies in the British government. Gu Huayu nodded, you are right, maybe I am overthinking. Lu Zikan looked at Gu Huayu and asked, what are you thinking about? Lu Zikan had an intuition that the faint sadness in Gu Huayu's eyes was related to this. Gu Huayu pulled down the corner of her mouth and smiled dryly, and said truthfully, I'm worried that the affairs of the Hua family back then were related to the British father-in-law. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, The Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 229. Chapter 229, Don't Turn Your Arms Outwards. Lu Zikan was stunned, can't you? Grandfather harmed Uncle Hua. It doesn't make sense. Before the scandal between Lu Dingning and Lu Xiran came out, the Duke of England was a hereditary government. Xiao, do you understand? Looking at Daxing, who still has this honor. What else does grandfather dislike? Why would he do such a thing? Once the incident fails, everyone will be executed. Gu Huayu nodded, I can't figure it out. The British man shouldn't have any motive for committing the crime. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope not, otherwise, there will be a huge chasm between us. Lu Zikan felt anxious and uncomfortable when he heard the words. So he said, Xiao, no matter what happens in the future, we will be fine, okay. Gu Huayu understood what Lu Zikan meant, and her nose felt a little sore. If such a day comes, I don't know if I can do it. Lu Zikan held Gu Huayu in his arms and whispered, Xiao, if one day you really leave me by your side, I will love you and pamper you for the rest of my life, okay? Never abandon me, okay? Lu Zikan was very panicked. He was afraid that things would go as Gu Huayu expected. Gu Huayu's heart ached, and she closed her eyes. After a moment, she nodded slightly, okay, her stomach growled inappropriately. Gu Huayu said embarrassedly, Qinjian, I'm hungry. Lu Zikan immediately let go of his hands and said, what do you want to eat? I'll go with you to eat. How about we go to Chang'an restaurant and I'll have someone make you a bowl of soup. Wan Dangtu at Chang'an restaurant makes the soup. Soup is the best. Eat a bowl of soup at night, it's soft and gentle, and it's good for your health. Okay, let's go now. The two of them left the small courtyard with their fingers intertwined. Rugjuan was lying on the horizontal board in front of the carriage, crossing his legs to look at the starry sky. When he heard the door open, he turned around and saw Lu Zikan and Gu Huayu coming out. He quickly turned over and jumped down, bowing and saying, Master, Princess. Lu Zikan said, go to Chang'an restaurant. Rugjuan leaned forward and said, yes. After saying that, Rugjuan quickly put on the footstool and raised the curtain. After Gu Huayu and Lu Zikin got into the car, he put the footstool away and drove towards Chang'an restaurant. The car left the alley and walked onto the street. Compared with the silence in the alley, the shouting, and laughter on the street seemed to be another world. Gu Huayu opened the curtains and looked outside. Lu Zikin came over and looked out the window and said, "It's getting hot. People stay indoors during the day and don't want to go out. But at night, it's cooler outside and there are more people going shopping, so the night market is very lively." Gu Huayu nodded. In her last life, due to poor health, she could only stay at home and listen to the lively scenes her brothers and sisters gave her. When she traveled to modern times, her favorite thing to do was to let Hua Jinlin accompany her shopping. Later, she liked to travel during holidays. While others watched the scenery, she was crowded with people and had wild thoughts. Lu Zikin saw Gu Huayu's happy look and asked, "How about we go down for a walk?" Gu Huayu shook her head, "Forget it, let's do it another day. Another day you accompany me to the south of the city. I also want to eat the grilled fish in the south of the city." Lu Zikin happily agreed, "Okay, let's go tomorrow night, how about it?" Gu Huayu thought that she would have nothing to do tomorrow, so she nodded and said, "Okay, I'll go tomorrow night." The car passed 2 streets, turned into an alley, and soon entered the backyard of Chang'an restaurant. Shopkeeper Miao received the letter and hurried over to greet her. Seeing Gu Huayu next to Lu Zikin, he was stunned for a moment, and then said politely, "Master, Princess." Gu Huayu nodded slightly towards shopkeeper Miao. LV Zikin ordered, "Let Wan Dang to make a bowl of soup and bring it up." Shopkeeper Miao bowed and said, "Okay, I'll go and give you the instructions." Lu Zikin took Gu Huayu up to the private room on the 2nd floor. After a while, shopkeeper Miao came in with tea and snacks. Gu Huayu looked around and said, "The layout here is the same as that of the Qing guest house." Lu Zikin smiled and nodded, and said, "I'm a bit of a jerk. Once I like someone, I don't want to see anyone else. The layout of my place is almost the same," and Ming Hao said, "I'm boring." "Is it boring? I think it's very cute." Lu Zikin put Gu Huayu's tea in front of her and said, "Those who understand me are Xiao." Gu Huayu suddenly thought of Shi Yamei's marriage and said, "My aunt's cousin's son Lu Yu said that he will be transferred back to the capital this year and join the Ministry of Household Affairs as a doctor. Aunt Ping plans to bring Yamei and Lu Yu together, and Aunt Ping is very satisfied with Lu Yu. If Yadamumu doesn't propose marriage quickly, he will hum." "Who, Lu Yu?" Lu Zikin asked in surprise. Gu Huayu nodded and said, "Yes, Lu Yu." "What's wrong?" "The Lu family is really going to propose marriage, but Ming Hao has met a strong enemy. He has to tell his aunt about this quickly and ask her to come to propose marriage as soon as possible." Gu Huayu nodded and said, "I heard from my aunt that this person is indeed outstanding." Lu Zikin put down the teacup and said, "The strong rival I'm talking about is not just Lu Yu who is excellent. But, how to put it? Let's agree first, you can't be angry." Gu Huayu asked sensitively, "Oh? Does it have anything to do with you? Tell me, I'm not angry." Lu Zikin looked at Gu Huayu, as if to make sure she was really not angry. Gu Huayu smiled and urged, "Speak quickly." Lu Zikin said, "Lu Yuji and Ming Hao were in the same year, and Lu Yu passed the Jinchi. It was also that year, Miss Shi-san threatened to like me and asked about me everywhere, but I went everywhere to hide from Miss Shi-san. Lu Yu looked for this matter. I'll treat Miss Shi-san well." "Why is he looking for you? He is familiar with Yamei? Have they crossed paths?" Gu Huayu asked curiously. Lu Zikin said, "They should be familiar with each other. Mrs. Wang and Lu Yu's mother are cousins, and they have a good relationship. By the way, Lu Yu's father Lu Guangliang and my father were close friends. When your uncle was alive, they were very close to each other." MRS Ping went to visit MRS Ping. Lu Yu's mother often visited your aunt. The world is such a small place, just around the corner are your relatives. Lu Zikin smiled and said, who says it's not the case? Gu Huayu asked, Lu Yu wants you to treat Yame well because he cares about Yame. Lu Zikin shook his head and said, it's not just that he cares, he is very fond of Miss Shi-san. On the day he came to find me, we drank together. He was in a bad mood, drank a few more drinks, and ended up drunk. Gu Huayu opened her eyes wide and looked at Lu Zikin. He said a lot. Right. Lu Zikin nodded, yes, he said a lot of things from his heart. Not long after that meeting, he went to work abroad. Oh my god. I'm touched. How about we get together with him and Yame? Lu Zikin raised his hand and poked Gu Huayu's head. No, if you want to reconcile him and Miss Shi-san, what should Ming Hao do? I have to take care of Ming Hao. Ming Hao is my cousin and also your cousin. We can't turn our arms outward, right? Gu Huayu nodded. Sir, the Fu Gang is here. Shopkeeper Miao came in with the Fu Gang. Okay, put it on the table. Shopkeeper Miao put down the soup and stepped out knowingly. Lu Zikin filled a bowl for Gu Huayu and said, Xiao, come on, eat it while it's hot. Okay, Gu Huayu sat down opposite Lu Zikin, lowered her head to take a bite, nodded and said, it's delicious. Zikin, you can eat it too. Lu Zikin shook his head, I'm not hungry, you eat. Gu Huayu handed over a spoonful, open your mouth. Lu Zikin looked at Gu Huayu and obediently opened his mouth to accept. So, the two of you finished the soup in the bowl one bite at a time. Gu Huayu looked at her watch and said, it's getting late, let's go back. Lu Zikin was anxious to go back to see MRSGN, so he nodded and said, okay, I will stay with you tomorrow. Lu Zikin sent Gu Huayu back to Wutong Lane and immediately returned to Qingqiu Duke's mansion. Back at the house, Lu Zikin said to Rugjuan, have you gone to see if your aunt is resting? Rugjuan bowed and responded, yes, I understand, little one. After Rugjuan left, Lu Zikin went straight to Tingza's Hu. When the porter saw Lu Zikin approaching, he bowed and said, Sixth Master. LV Zikin asked, is my eldest cousin here? The porter leaned forward and said, go back to Mr. Six, I'm not here. I went to Huixian Tower to attend Mr. Lin's cultural reception in Ningyuan. Lu Zikin turned around and walked towards Zizi Garden, and met Rugjuan at the rockery in the garden. Master, my uncle, my wife, and my wife, they are all enjoying the shade in the old lady's yard. After hearing this, Lu Zikin walked up to Qingfang Hall. When MRS saw Lu Zikin coming over, she joked, why did Zikin come here free? Didn't you go out tonight? Lu Zikin replied, I'm back from going out. After saying that, Lu Zikin greeted MRS Jean and MRS GN. As she spoke, Grandma Feng had someone place a chair next to MRS Jean. MRS Jean pointed to the chair and said, Zikin, come and sit. After Lu Zikin thanked her, he sat next to MRS Jean. MRS Jean asked, come over here, what's the matter? LV Zikin leaned forward and said, Zi Qin has something to do to find his aunt. MRSGN was surprised and said, Zi Qin wants to see me for something. What's the matter? Lu Zikin nodded and told the story about Ye Minghao and Shi Yame. MRSGN was so excited that she was a little incoherent. This kid Minghao is really ignorant. He has someone in his heart and he didn't even tell us, which made me anxious and angry over him. MRS said with a smile, now that's good, our family has become more intimate with the Shi mansion. Minghao and San Yetu, Mingjin, and Higu. The family relationship between sister-in-law and Yingzi is really enviable. Lu Zikin said, my eldest cousin has not told my aunt about the matter between my eldest cousin and Miss Shi-san, and Miss Shi-san has not told MRS Ping either. The people in the Ping mansion are busy negotiating for Miss Shi-san's marriage. Zikin, How did you know? Did you learn it from Yan Ran? Mrsya asked. Luzikin nodded and explained what he knew in detail. At the end, he said, the marriage between the eldest cousin and Miss Shi-san should be done sooner rather than later. Auntie will go to Shi Mansion tomorrow morning to tell Mrs. Ping about the matter and take a look at Mrs. Ping's attitude. If Mrs. Ping nods, my aunt will invite a matchmaker. Go to Shi Mansion to propose marriage. Grandma, do you think this is okay? Mrs. Jean nodded. Well, Minghao and Sanya are already quite old. Since they are in love, we should settle down as soon as possible. Mrsya looked at Luzikin. Minghao's marriage has been decided, but what about you and Yan Ran? When will it be decided? Luzikin replied, let's wait until I finish my scientific examination. Mrs. Jean said, Sister Shan, please don't rush him. Let him prepare for the exam in peace. Everything must be finished after the exam. Gu Huayu returned to Wutong Lane. Seeing that it was still early, she turned around and entered the space. Seeing that Atong was actually there, I was so excited that I quickly sat down. I'm a busy man. I spend all my time with your general. Why do you have so much time to come here today? Atong said, Yan Ran, he wants to take a concubine, what should I do? At this moment, Gu Huayu realized that Atong was so thin that she was almost out of shape. How long had it been since they last met? Less than 3 months. Gu Huayu asked with some heartache, what's going on? Aren't you childhood sweethearts? You finally got together, why did he change his mind? Atong shook his head, I just realized that his heart is not with me at all. His heart has always been on his cousin. The reason why he treated me well was because he wanted me to heal his cousin. Besides, his soldiers are injured and just need my treatment. Gu Huayu said in disbelief, how could such a tacky and thing happen to you? Didn't you even notice that he treated you like this? Atong shook his head in pain, my heart is all about him, and I believe whatever he says. I never had any doubts, and I didn't know the truth until I ran into him living with his cousin. Gu Huayu looked at Atong sympathetically, hey, what can you tell me? I really want to hug you, but we are separated by time and space. I can only watch you from a distance, Atong, you have to be more open-minded and strong. Atong raised his head, closed his eyes, and tears flowed down his face. Yan Ran, my heart hurts so much. Gu Huayu replied, I know, I feel heartbroken for you too. Yan Ran, what should I do? Gu Huayu asked, what do you want to do? Atong shook his head, I don't know. Before, all I thought about was him, and he was everything to me. Now, my heart is empty, and I don't even have a friend to talk to. Gu Huayu said, you have me. You and I are separated by time and space. You can't come to me, and I can't go to you, Atong said in a low voice. Gu Huayu consoled her, but we can talk. If you want to talk to someone, you can come to me. Yan Ran, thank you, but I still feel sad. Gu Huayu nodded, I understand. Trust me, time is good medicine and it will heal the pain in your heart. Is it possible? For 3 months, I have been crying every day, closing my eyes and thinking about him. My heart aches when I think of him. Seeing him with her makes me crazy with jealousy. I hate myself for being like this, but I can't lift it up or let it go. Yan Ran, I hate it so much. What do I do? Atong confided to Gu Huayu in pain. Gu Huayu was heartbroken when she saw Atong's helpless look, believe me, it will happen. Atong, you have to believe in yourself. But what should I do? He will carry her into the house tomorrow. I don't want to live under the same roof with her, and I don't want to see them having with each other. That way, I will go crazy, Atong said desperately. Gu Huayu asked, why don't you make peace with him? Atong asked, what is harmony and separation? Gu Huayu explained,
Harmony is the most important thing. Both husband and wife agree to divorce. From now on, they can live well together. It sounds better than divorcing the wife. Atong shook his head and said, in Daki, there is no reconciliation, only a letter of divorce. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 230. Chapter 230 Tracking. Gu Huayu blurted out, then divorce, it doesn't matter if you divorce him or he divorces you, leave him alone and be beautiful. Do your parents know? Atong shook his head, I was afraid that they would be worried, so I didn't dare to tell them. I was also afraid of telling them that they wouldn't allow it, and being divorced would be very embarrassing. I was afraid that they would care about face and not care about it. Gu Huayu came up with an idea, you should go home immediately. Don't dress up. The more haggard you are, the better. Go back and watch your father and mother cry, and tell them about the grievances you have suffered. If it hurts their heart, they will support you. Don't feel bad if they care about face. After you divorce him, you will start your own business and live alone, and I will support you. After hearing this, Atong pondered for a while, nodded and said, okay, I understand, thank you Yan Ran, I'll go first. Gu Huayu said, go and remember not to wrong yourself. If others don't feel sorry for you, you have to feel sorry for yourself. Yes, thank you Yan Ran. I'm leaving. After Atong left, Gu Huayu stayed in space for a long time. Coming out of the space, Gu Huayu lay on the bed and tossed and turned for a long time, unable to fall asleep. Atong has excellent medical skills. He is young and can apply silver needles as fast as fire. She thought that an outstanding person like Atong would be cherished and loved by others. Atong's heart was wrongly paid to her, and she was not worth it. While Gu Huayu felt heartbroken for Atong, she thought wildly about herself, wondering if Luzikan would treat her like this. If he treats himself like this, what should he do? Unconsciously, Gu Huayu fell into her own assumptions. After tossing and turning in the latter half of the night, I drifted off to sleep. The next day, her biological clock woke her up at 9 o'clock on time, and Gu Huayu only felt dizzy. Thinking about Atong, I walked into the space uneasily and walked around. Seeing that Atong was not there, there was no message. Gu Huayu was worried and left a message to Atong, asking her how the situation was going. Gu Huayu came out of the space, washed herself briefly, then cheered up and went to pay her respects to Mrs. Ping. Gu Huayu had breakfast with Mrs. Ping, then got up and went to Daowen Street. Concerned about Atong's matter and not sleeping well at night, Gu Huayu looked a little depressed and lacked energy. Seeing her listless look, Gu Chengwan asked, Xiao, what's wrong with you? Are you feeling unwell? It's okay, I didn't sleep well last night and I'm a little sleepy, Gu Huayu replied. Then you go back and have a rest. We are in the shop, so you don't have to worry about it here, Gu Chengwan said with concern. Gu Huayu thought that she would be fine just staying in the shop, so she nodded and said, then I'll go back. Go, be careful on the road, Gu Chengwan warned. Gu Huayu came out of Huayu Pavilion, looked left and right, then turned right and walked along Daowen Street. She was not sleepy at this time, she was just in a low mood. She didn't want this bad mood to affect the people around her, and she was afraid that she would be even more depressed if she stayed alone, so she chose to go to a busy place and use the excitement around her to dispel the gloom in her heart. Gu Huayu walked along the street, going wherever there were more people. From a distance, she saw that there were only heads of people. When she got closer, she felt that it was not very lively. Gu Huayu couldn't remember how many streets she walked around. Her legs were sore from walking, so she found a restaurant to rest. When the waiter saw Gu Huayu walking into the store, he greeted her enthusiastically, Miss, please come in. Gu Huayu asked, is there an elegant room? The waiter replied apologetically, Miss, I'm sorry, the private room is already full. It's dinner time now, and there's only one empty table in the hall. Gu Huayu looked in the direction of Xiao Er's finger and saw an empty seat in the corner. Gu Huayu nodded, okay, just that table. The waiter led Gu Huayu to the empty table in the corner. When Gu Huayu was still 3 steps away from the empty table, 2 big men rushed up from behind and sat on the empty seat ahead of her. Gu Huayu quickly looked at the 2 of them. One had a full beard, and the other had a flat nose with turned-out nostrils. With his round face, he looked a bit like Mr. Pig. We arrived in time, there is still another table, Lu Wu, over here, the bearded man shouted behind Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu turned sideways and looked back, and saw 3 big men coming this way behind her. The person walking in front replied, here we come. The waiter looked at the big men and said to Gu Huayu in embarrassment, Miss, I'm sorry, the store has no vacancies for the time being. Otherwise, please go up and wait, or find another store. Mr. Pig said hypocritically, this boy is going to be given to this lady. I'm sorry, my brother didn't know about it. Please forgive me, lady. The bearded eyes wandered around Gu Huayu, and he said with a playful smile, if the young lady doesn't mind, how about sharing a table with the brothers? The brothers invite the young lady to dinner. While speaking, Lu Wu and others had already walked to Gu Huayu's side. Gu Huayu instinctively took a step behind her, but Lu Wu stretched out his hand, intending to pull Gu Huayu to sit over. Brothers are generous people, little lady, you're welcome. Gu Huayu took another step to the left when Lu Wu's hand was about to touch her, stood behind the waiter, and avoided Lu Wu's hand. Seeing Gu Huayu avoid her, the bearded man came over with a smile and said, don't be afraid, little lady. I'm the most considerate brother and the most loving sister. Come on, come and have a meal with me. Said, the bearded man winked at Lu Wu and the others, who quickly stood up and surrounded Gu Huayu. The people at the table were not in the right position. They all stood up and moved to the side. Gu Huayu looked at the movements of several people and knew that they had all practiced. It seems that this group of people is coming for me. Gu Huayu walked along in her wild thoughts and didn't even notice these people following behind her. The waiter was so frightened that his legs trembled, and he shouted, everyone, heroes, if you have something to say, say it well, if you have something to say, say it well. Shut up, the bearded man glared at the waiter and scolded him. The movement here caused a commotion in the hall. Some people had stood up, and some were holding chopsticks and wondering what was going on, asking what was wrong. Gu Huayu was highly focused, thinking about how to escape. The waiter was so frightened by the beard that he wet his pants. Several men looked at the waiter, turned their heads and fanned them with their hands in disgust. Gu Huayu took the opportunity to throw a few silver needles in Lu Wu's direction, and Lu Wu and 2 people on his left and right were hit by the needles. Gu Huayu counted silently in her mind, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When she counted to 5, Lu Wu and the others knelt down. Gu Huayu's silver needle did not hit the vital point. In full view of the public, she could not kill these people, so she only used poison to temporarily trap them. Mr. Pig saw the 3 of them kneeling down and shouted nervously, Zuzi, Futong, what's wrong with you? The bearded man looked at the 3 of them, then turned to look at Gu Huayu in shock, you bitch, what did you do to them? Gu Huayu raised her hand and threw 2 silver needles out. The bearded man hurriedly avoided the opportunity. Gu Huayu guessed the direction of his avoidance. The bearded man dodged the first silver needle, but did not avoid the second silver needle. Gu Huayu turned around again and threw the silver needle at Mr. Pig. When Mr. Pig saw the bearded man kneeling down, he himself was hit by the needle. Gu Huayu looked at the 5 people kneeling on the ground, clapped her hands, turned around and walked out. The shopkeeper chased me, miss, you can't leave.
Gu Huayu asked, why? The shopkeeper said, the lady hurt someone in the small shop. Also, because of your fight, all the customers left. The losses must be calculated. I am running a small business and cannot afford to lose. I have already asked someone to report the loss. Officer, miss, please stay and cooperate with the government. Gu Huayu didn't want to make this matter a big deal, so she said, okay, I'll pay for your loss. As he spoke, Gu Huayu took out a gold lock and threw it to the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper stretched out his hand to take the gold lock and was looking at it carefully when the waiter came over with two officials. When Gu Huayu saw the official officer coming, she knew she couldn't get away for a while, so she raised her hand to take the gold lock out of the shopkeeper's hand. Now that the official officer is here, I'll do whatever I have to do. I can't bear this loss. The gold in hand was gone again, and the shopkeeper regretted it so much that he complained to the waiter, how come it came so fast? Waiter. Two officials came over, and one of them asked, what's going on? Is there something wrong? The shopkeeper came over with a smile on his face and leaned forward to report to the official. After hearing this, the official turned around and looked at Gu Huayu. Who is your surname? Where do you live? Why? What's going on here? Injuring people in the store? Gu Huayu replied, back to the official, I am Gu Huayu. I live in Wutong Lane, Qingyang Street, in the north of the city. The two officials looked at each other, and one of them immediately ran back, you wait here, I'll call the boss. It was also Gu Huayu's good luck. The two officials were close associates of Shi Hego, the third son of Shi Mansion. What they talked about these days was that the leader had a princess cousin. Gu Huayu's life experience was told among them like a legend. The shopkeeper has been dealing with people all year round, and has long developed the ability to observe people's emotions. Seeing the expressions of the two policemen changing drastically after hearing Gu Hua's report, their hearts tightened immediately, thinking to themselves, could it be that this girl's identity is impressive? The shopkeeper came forward and said, Miss, sir, please sit down in the room. Gu Huayu didn't want to enter the store anymore and said, no, let's talk about anything here. The shopkeeper hurriedly asked someone to bring the chairs out. Gu Huayu was not polite and moved her chair to the side and sat down. After a while, the officials who left came over with a group of people. The one who walked in the front was Shi Hego, the third son of Shi. Gu Huayu stood up and said, third cousin, why are you here? Shi Hego looked at Gu Huayu and asked, without reviewing Huayu's question, you're not hurt, are you? Gu Huayu shook her head, no. Shi Hego glanced into the store, where are the people who are giving you trouble? Are they inside? Gu Huayu nodded, yes, they have been hit by cartilage powder and will not be able to stand up for another quarter of an hour. Shi Hego nodded, turned around and said to the people, go in and take the troublemaker back. A group of servants rushed into the store. Gu Huayu asked, third cousin is serving in the yamen. Shi Hego nodded, yes, I am in charge of the Chengdong area under the jurisdiction of Jingzhou Mansion. Gu Huayu looked around and asked, is this the east of the city? Shi Hego looked around and replied, this is the Kaiji restaurant on Jingsan Road, Dongshumen, east of the city. How did you get here? Come over. Shi Hego was surprised and said, what? Came here? From Wutong Lane. Gu Huayu shook her head, no, from Daowen Street. Shi Hego looked at Gu Huayu in disbelief and gave her a thumbs up, come over from Daowen Street, Niu. It will take more than 2 hours, right? Gu Huayu shook her head. She didn't wear a watch when she went out today. She didn't know how long she had been gone. I don't know, I walked all the way and ended up here. Shi Hego said, let's go and sit at my place. I'll have someone take you back. Gu Huayu followed Shi Hego toward the yamen. On Daowen Street, not long after Gu Huayu came out of Huayu Pavilion, Gu Chengwan went to the backyard to get something and saw Qingyu sitting in a rocking chair humming a tune. Gu Chengwan asked, "Why are you still here? Didn't you send Xiao back?" Qingyu sat up and asked, "Is the princess going back?" "Why are you going back? Xiao has already left." After Qingyu heard this, he hurried to catch the car. Gu Chengwan was worried and told Hengxia a few words before going out to catch up with Qingyu. "Qingyu, wait, I will go back with you." Qingyu's car turned left and headed towards Wuitong Lane. The two returned to the house and asked at the same time, "Is Yan Ran back? Has the princess returned?" The porter shook his head and said, "I haven't seen the princess come back." Qingyu asked, "Where is Uncle Hua?" The porter replied, "The sixth master of the British government came to visit the old lady." Uncle Hua led the sixth master to the backyard. Gu Chengwan hurried to the backyard. When she entered the house, she said to Mrs. Ping and Gu Dichang, "Grandma, third uncle, Xiao Yu is missing." Everyone in the room was stunned. Lu Ziqin stood up anxiously, "When did it happen? When did you see Xiao Yu?" Mrs. Wang was surprised by Lu Ziqin's eagerness, and her eyes couldn't help but darken a little. Huada sat near the door and asked, "Didn't the princess go to Daowen Street? Where is Qingyu?" Qingyu came in from outside the house. "Uncle Hua, the little one is here." Huada turned around and looked at Qingyu. "Aren't you following the princess? Where is the princess?" Gu Chengwan said, "Xiao went to the shop today. I saw her listless look and asked her if she felt unwell. She said no and said she didn't sleep well last night. I let her come back to catch up on her sleep. As a result, when I went to the backyard to get something, I saw Qingyu in the backyard and asked him about Xiao, but he didn't know at all. We hurriedly drove back to catch him, but we didn't see Xiao along the way." Huada turned around and went out, followed by Qingyu. Huada said as he walked, "Hurry and have a look at Minjiao Pavilion." "Yes, little one, let's go." Qingyu trotted towards the outer courtyard. Huada went to the front yard and asked people to search for shops on Ma Xing Street and Toad Street. Lu Ziqin and Gu Dichang followed them out and asked, "Where will Xiao go?" Huada shook his head, "I've sent people to various shops, let's wait." Lu Ziqin said, "Miss Gu is very tired of talking. Did you discuss something last night? Did you encounter any trouble?" Huada shook his head. "In recent days, the princess returns to the courtyard after dark, and no one disturbs her, and she does not discuss matters. As for the shops, the only shop the princess is in charge of now is the one in Huayuge Pavilion. She only listens to reports and does not interfere with other shops." End of this chapter.